listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show with Captain Jeff.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download at www.audibletrial.com/airlinepilotguy. Over 100,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Airline Pilot Guy, episode number 99.
Flight 209er, you are cleared for takeoff.
Roger.
LA to 123.9.
Roger. Request connected.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from my side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 317 in the Holiday Inn in beautiful Flint, Michigan. In this episode, a Challenger 601 crashes in Aspen, a Saudi 767 lands with a right main gear up, an Air India Airbus A320 has a runway excursion, more news and feedback including contaminated air, simulators, sleep apnea, and more. So get all settled in, tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions, electronic devices powered on. Flight 99 is ready for pushback. Well, hello and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy Show. As I said, I'm Captain Jeff Nielsen, a captain for a major U.S. airline. Now, for those of you out there who have made snide comments about me on YouTube, shame on you. I am a real airline pilot. Yeah, I'm not wearing an airline pilot uniform right now, but I'm in my layover hotel. And there's my hat back there. I don't know if you can see it. But I really am an airline pilot. And I do this show as a labor of love because I want to give back as much as I can to an industry which has made my life very complete, I'd say. I've always aspired to be an airline pilot. I've always loved the idea of flying since I was a little kid, and I'm living my dream. And I want you to enjoy kind of vicariously living it through me. Or maybe you're already out there living it as well. General aviation pilots, professional pilots, whatever. So, hey, we're all part of this big aviation community, whether we're pilots or not. And it's a lot of fun. And I'm learning so much from doing this podcast. So, as I said, it's a labor of love, and it's kind of a selfish thing for me because it just, I don't know, it helps me and makes me learn about aspects of aviation that I didn't know that much about or anything at all. All right, well, enough blabbing on about that. So I'm glad you're here. It is, let's see, what day is today? 6, 7... I think it's like the 8th of, or the 9th. I think the 8th of January. Last show I recorded before, it was last week actually, before I went to Las Vegas for the new Media Expo. And so I came home from that trip on Friday. The next day in the morning, I left for Las Vegas. Had to jump seat out there because there were absolutely no seats available on the airplane. That's one of the advantages of being a commercial airline pilot. We can use that opportunity to jump seat on our own airline or other carriers if it's available. And if it weren't available, I would not have made it, that's for sure. And arrived in Las Vegas for the new Media Expo late afternoon, Las Vegas time. Interestingly, when I was waiting at the gate in Atlanta, there were just a huge number of people in the gate area that were wearing Auburn University paraphernalia. You know, like, and I went to school at Auburn. I'm an Auburn alum, and I thought to myself, you know, I know that Auburn's playing in the national championship game, which just happened. What was it? Night before last. And sadly, my school, my team lost. But it was a good game. Nothing to hang their head low about at all, for sure. But I digress. I was looking at all these people, and I'm thinking, you know, I know they're in the national championship game, but I thought it was out in California somewhere, like in Pasadena, the Rose Bowl. And I finally started talking with a gentleman in the gatehouse area, and I said, "Hey, why are you going to Las Vegas?" And he said, "Oh, well, the price of a ticket from Atlanta to Los Angeles was about 3 times the cost of a ticket from Atlanta to Las Vegas." And so a bunch of people decided they'd fly to Las Vegas, maybe enjoy a day or two in the casinos and all the attractions in the Las Vegas area before they boarded buses from Las Vegas to LA, which I believe to Pasadena from Las Vegas is probably about 3.5 hour drive. And then they're going to go to the game and then either fly back from there or most likely take a bus back to Las Vegas and then fly back home. So that was kind of strange to see all these Auburn fans, but I felt right at home because War Eagle, I'm an Auburn fan too. All right, so, excuse me. So I ended up heading to Las Vegas and finally made it to my hotel. I took one of those airport shuttles. Excuse me. I should have either rented a car or I should have taken a taxi because on the shuttle van with all these Auburn people, they go to all the different hotels, and my hotel, the Rio, was the last hotel on that shuttle run. So it was almost 2 hours from the time we left well, maybe not that long, but it was quite some time before we finally arrived at the Rio. And I met up with an internet friend, a social media friend, a fellow podcaster. His name is Eric Scaresbrook, right? And I just know him as Irk, and he has a podcast. You can find him at Irk Channel, or Channel Irk, excuse me. And he has several music podcasts, and he does another podcast he just calls Irk Pod, and he puts out quite a few different types of programming. And we've been kind of following each other and exchanging tweets back and forth for quite some time. And I noticed on my Twitter feed that Eric was in Las Vegas, and I didn't know why he was in Las Vegas. And I sent him a tweet and I said, "Hey, I'm going to be in Las Vegas too." I sent him a direct message, and he said, "Oh, yeah, I know. I just heard your latest episode where you talked about going to the new Media Expo to possibly pick up your award trophy for winning the podcast awards for your category." I didn't win. There were several really, really good podcasts in my category, and the one that won, I don't know. I think it's called Internet Box, and I listened to a little bit of their podcast, and I really have no idea what it's about. A lot of swearing, a lot of cursing, and I don't know. I think they talk about games and stuff, like game consoles and whatever. They have a very engaged community apparently, and they won that category. But so he said, "Yeah, well, I'm attending the new media conference." Well, no, before we got to that part, well, you know what? Let's do this. We ended up going up to my room on Sunday evening before I left the next day home, and we recorded a little something. And so let me play some of that for you.
Podcasting from the Airline Pilot Guy mobile studio, I'm Irk, and with me is Captain Jeff, the Airline Pilot Guy. Hello, Captain Jeff.
Hello.
How are you, mate?
Oh, I'm tired, actually. It's been a long day.
It certainly has. And we're both in Vegas for New Media Expo, and neither of us knew that we were going to be here. Like, I didn't know you were going to be here. You didn't know I was going to be here.
Right, until just a day or two before I showed up.
I heard your latest episode 98 of the Airline Pilot Guy, and right at the end you said, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to be at New Media Expo at Vegas." And I'm like, "Well, I'm there." And I sent you a message, and you sent me a message back.
Well, I was following your tweets, and I could see that you were in Las Vegas, but honestly, I didn't know why you were here. I just figured it was part of your whirlwind tour of the United States. And I said to you, "So what are you doing in Las Vegas?"
New Media Expo.
I went, "Oh, okay, that's where..." Well, I'm staying in the Rio. Where are you going to be staying?
The Rio.
Okay. So I basically told you when I was coming in, and you met me at reception yesterday afternoon. It was amazing.
It was, and so you flew in from Atlanta. You've got a weekend off from flying with Acme.
Yep, I sure do. And unfortunately, I have to leave tomorrow morning to head back to Atlanta, and because I have a trip that leaves on Tuesday.
So what does an event like New Media Expo, and I know that you're not...
Okay, well, that's enough of that. That's a little over 12 minutes long, and if you want to hear more from that recording, I'll have a link somewhere in the show notes that you can reach some. I think Eric ended up breaking that up into little pieces and putting it on his Audio Boo channel, so I'll have a link to Erk, his Audio Boo channel, and you can listen to all of that if you're interested in that kind of thing. So, as I mentioned, went to New Media Expo, got to meet up with a lot of like-minded people interested in podcasting, and on Sunday night, the Podcast Awards occurred, and I was there, and as I said, I didn't win, which is fine. I really didn't expect to. And I was also there for a couple of the podcasts, affiliate podcasts of the StarQuest Production Network, of which I am an affiliate podcaster as well. And I'm also the host of one of our flagship programs called Catholic Weekend, a weekly panel podcast. So, yeah, didn't win anything. Stayed up late, met with some more people after that award ceremony. Oh, by the way, I had an exhibit hall pass because that was the cheapest way for me to take part in all the stuff going on in Las Vegas. And I thought it was odd because I'd gone to one of these new media expos. It was called something else back in 2006 and 2007. And back then, when you went into the exhibition hall, people that were exhibiting things, it was all related to podcasting. You know, microphone, audio equipment, ways to host your podcast and monetize your podcast and get stats for your podcast and all that kind of stuff. And this time, there were several booths in the exhibit hall that had nothing to do at all with podcasting, and these people were like hardcore salespeople. They wouldn't leave you alone. In fact, this one lady from, and they all seem to be from Israel. I don't know why that's the case, but the lady that kind of grabbed a hold of me, so to speak, and would not let me leave the booth before she sold me some outrageously priced stuff, like a battery case for $149, some Bluetooth headphones for $300. They were throwing all these things, you know, you buy one, get one free and all that kind of stuff. I said, well, that's great. Let me go back to my room because the credit card I want to use I don't have with me. I need to go back up to my room and get it, and I'll be right back. You can leave all that in your packaging and, you know, the bag that you set aside for me and all that kind of stuff. And so I went up to my room and broke out my trusty MacBook Pro, did a little bit of research, and guess what? Those Bluetooth headphones that she was trying to sell to me for $300, I found for about $28 online, and they did not get good reviews. And they were not, by the way, the headphones and the battery pack for the iPhone that she was trying to sell me, they didn't even have a logo on it. That's kind of suspicious. The battery pack, I think they were trying to sell for $150. I found for $19 or something. So, needless to say, I did not get ripped off, thankfully. And I just thought it was odd that all these a couple booths with these massage things. You know, like you put the little sensors or electrodes on your body, and then it sends some pulses through, electronic impulses, and that excites your muscles. It did feel good, actually, but I don't think it was worth whatever they were trying to sell it for. So anyway, again, I'm digressing from what I'm trying to say. So that was my New Media Expo experience. And will I do it again? I don't know. We'll see. Just depends, I guess, on a bunch of things. Las Vegas, quite a bit different than the last time I was there. The last time I laid over in Las Vegas was back in, I don't know, it must have been 15 years ago, maybe, or more, when I was a 727 co-pilot. More than that. I think the last time I flew as a 727 co-pilot was back in the mid-90s. So I hope you don't hear my stomach growling right now. I didn't eat lunch because I needed to get this podcast out. So I forgo. I did not eat lunch, and I hope to eat an early dinner after I finish this recording. So, left Monday morning, and again I had to jump seat back to Atlanta, and with the 3-hour time change, ended up finally coming into my house about 7:30 or something like that. So it was pretty much traveling all day long, and the flight was delayed for, I think the inbound flight coming in from somewhere where they were experiencing weather issues caused us to depart late out of Las Vegas, and I didn't get home until, as I said, didn't walk in my door until about 7:30 p.m. on Monday night. And then I quickly exchanged my dirty clothes for clean and got my uniform set up and out early yesterday morning, where the temperature, I'm transitioning now to the crazy weather in the United States these past few days. You may have heard about it in the news, where the temperatures were just extremely cold. They're calling this the polar vortex. I guess this polar cap air that's supposed to be up somewhere near the poles has somehow gotten dragged down by the jet stream, and it's as far south as Florida. I mean, Florida, some parts of Florida were experiencing below freezing temperatures, and it's just nuts. So when I left for my trip on Tuesday morning, I was standing at the train platform. I was going to take the train to work, and I think the temperature was like 6 degrees or 5 degrees, something like that. And with the wind blowing, I think the wind chill was -10. Definitely not something that we are used to experiencing in Atlanta. And then somebody walks up and says the train broke down, probably because it's so darn cold. And so I got back in my car and drove all the way to the airport. And that's the rest of the story. That was yesterday. It's a 3-day trip. This is day 2. It's Wednesday. I'm in Flint, Michigan, and it's cold here, but beautiful. I'm looking out the window here. Beautiful blue sky, some white clouds in the distance. Lots of snow everywhere. Extremely low temperatures out here. I think it was, I don't remember now. I think it was in the single digits when we landed here. Maybe in the teens. I don't know. Anyway, so I'm happy. And actually, the room is kind of cold right now because I turned off the heating unit so that it wouldn't make some background noise. And that was more than an hour ago, because I've been trying to organize my notes and everything for the show. And it's actually getting pretty cold in here. So I need to hurry up and finish the show so I can turn the heat back on and I can go get something to eat. Okay, enough of that. Let me see what else I wanted to talk about. Oh, speaking of weather and, the problems that it caused with the airlines, especially up in the Northeast, where they not only had cold temperatures, but they also had snow. Chicago even. I know that's not the Northeast. So the Midwest, stretching all the way through the eastern seaboard, New York and up, caused havoc for several airlines, thousands of canceled flights. And it got so bad for JetBlue that they basically just said, okay, that's it. Our operations are so disrupted that we're just going to stop and cancel everything, and we're going to be shut down for 17 hours, and we're basically doing a big reset. And, wow, I don't know if any airline's ever done that in the past, but so that's what JetBlue did. So I hope that none of you listening were affected by that operation, or the lack of operation by JetBlue, but I thought that was interesting. I know that my airline, Acme, had many cancellations, and of course it disrupted our schedule as well. And of course, throw this in with the new FAR, Federal Aviation Regulations, Part 117, which deals with crew rest and fatigue and all that kind of stuff, new rest procedures and everything. And you got a a big problem. And so that kind of came together, compounded everything. So, and the other thing I wanted to mention about the weather, I'm watching these people in these airport concourses, and mind you, it's 3 degrees outside, 6 degrees, below zero wind chills, and people are walking around in shorts and flip-flops and all the stuff for warm weather, and they're walking around the airport, obviously having just come in from a flight or about to leave on a flight, and I'm thinking to myself, okay, what if you're one of those people who is involved in a situation where the airplane has a runway excursion. For whatever reason, you have to do an emergency evacuation, and this is what you're wearing. And the temperatures are, below freezing and sometimes below zero. Not a good thing. I mean, do you agree with me? I just don't think that's a smart thing. So just keep that in mind, that if the unexpected happens, look at what you're wearing and think, is this what I really want to be wearing outside, beside the runway or the taxiway or wherever we did an emergency evacuation? So probably not if you're wearing shorts and a flip-flop, unless you're, flying in Hawaii. So enough of that. Arash, my friend who has been helping me with the excellent website, thank you, Arash, told me to remember to tell everybody about the newsletter sign-up on the website. So if you go to the website, airlinepilotguy.com, and you'll see in the right column, just below a couple graphics, there's a place here. I think I bookmarked that. Let me go to it so that I can look at it and tell you exactly what to look for. In the right column, just below the Hear Us on Stitcher Radio on Demand little image, it says, enter your email address and receive notifications of new posts and podcasts. So if you put your email address there and then click on Notify Me, then when I put out a new episode, it'll send something to your email address, and you'll know, hey, Jeff has a new podcast. Don't worry, I'm not going to do anything evil or nefarious with your. In fact, I don't even know if I can access your email address. So I'm not really sure about that. Now, speaking of that, a lot of podcasters out there, a lot of bloggers, start email lists, and they publish newsletters every so often, or communicate with their newsletter or their email list people. And I've been thinking about doing that myself, but I just haven't had a lot of time to do the research on it and everything. But if I consider doing that, I'll let you know. And it'll be one of those things where you can unsubscribe from it if you're getting too much stuff from me, which I doubt that you'll get too much, but I'll let you know if that happens. So anyway, if you want an email notification, check out the sign up on the website. All right. And let's see, what is some other information I wanted to talk about before we start talking about the news? Oh, of course. One of my favorite pre-news things to do, and that is, of course, come on, are you ready for it? I love coffee. I love tea.
I love coffee, I love tea.
I love the Java and it loves me. Coffee and tea and the Java and me. A cup, a cup, a cup, a cup, a cup. Yes, the Coffee Fund. And they always seem to start singing louder when I'm trying to talk. Here, let me turn them down a little bit. Okay, thank you. They're going to keep singing in the background. That is the Ink Spots, recorded in 1940, Java Jive. Okay, so I would like to say a special thank you to all of you who have donated to my coffee fund since my last show. And by the way, actually, during the recording of the last show, you may remember that I got a notification that one of you actually donated some money to the coffee fund, and that was Jeff Krastenberg. Kevin St. John also joined him. Ruth Emery. We'll talk about Ruth here in a minute. Michael Carangelo. Darren McKinnon. Errol Yurtkaren. I hope I'm doing that right. And this one, I'm going to try it, but I'm not guaranteeing anything. Arjum de Moujij. I don't know. Probably butchered the heck out of that one. Quinn Banas, or Banas? Torsten Brush. And, of course, Jeff Moeller, who does a recurring payment. So thank you, all of you, for your generous donations to my coffee fund. If you want to learn more about the coffee fund, you can head over to airlinepilotguy.com and click on the coffee fund link at the top. Oh, and I also need to mention that one so far, has this is distracting me. Here, let me turn this down a little bit more. Okay, there we go. In fact, I'm just going to have them stop. Oh, now they're going to talk louder or sing louder. Okay, thank you, Inkspots. Somebody actually is the first member, the first patron of my Patreon page. You know, I mentioned that service. It's kind of like Kickstarter, but the reverse. So instead of putting money up and hoping that something gets made, you are actually charged whatever you pledge after the content is produced. So you can do a per episode contribution, $1, $2, $3, $5, whatever, different levels there. And Tom Seagraves is my guinea pig, my first celebrity in Patreon. So Tom Seagraves, thank you very much, sir. Do appreciate it. Tom pledged $5 per episode. And I've just decided that I'm going to go and produce a podcast every single day. So Tom, 5 times 30, $150 per month. Just kidding. You can actually limit the amount of money that is charged to you per month. So looking forward to communicating with you, Tom, and doing all kinds of fun stuff. So that's the Patreon page. You can find out information about that by going over to airlinepilotguy.com and /coffee fund, I believe is the way I set it up. Or just look for the coffee fund link. So thanks again, Tom, and everybody for your very generous donations. I do appreciate it. Okay, now finally, let's get on with some news. Just a few days ago, a private jet, a Challenger 601, I believe, was flying into Aspen, Colorado. One person died and 2 others were injured in the crash. And it was this took place on Sunday afternoon. And this airplane was trying to make an approach. Well, it did make an approach, and then it went around or missed on the approach because of extremely high tailwinds, and came back around and attempted another approach to the airport and ended up crashing when it hit the runway. And so, as I mentioned, I believe let's see, who was it that died? The co-pilot, I believe, is the one that died. He was his name is Sergio Emilio Carranza Brabata, 54 years old, of Mexico. I believe all the occupants of the airplane were from Mexico, and they were all pilots on board. So let's talk a little bit about Aspen, Colorado. I've not been there myself. I do know that Acme does fly in seasonally, along with, I think, American and United this time of year for the ski people. It's a big ski resort, Aspen, and it's a very, very challenging airport to fly into, from what I have read and from what I've heard. I believe the runway is about a little over 8,000 feet long. It's high altitude, and it's in high terrain, and it's in a valley. And the way you approach the airport is from the northwest, and you always land from the northwest heading to the southeast, runway 15, I believe. All the approaches, all the instrument approaches are from the northwest heading to land on 15. And I think all the takeoffs are in the opposite direction. So you know that there must be some terrain in there that is causing basically a one-way in and one-way out kind of a situation. So in most cases, if you have a really high tailwind, that would favor the opposite runway. But in this case, you can't come in from that direction because there's like a really rapidly rising terrain there. So I guess. If you're listening, if you've flown into Aspen, maybe you can chime in with us and give us some more information, some of your own experience. But I'm gathering that you will end up accepting higher tailwinds than perhaps you normally would. Now, many airlines have a maximum tailwind component for operating into any airport, and at my airline, it's a maximum of 10 knots. So if it's higher than that, then you're not going to land there. And in this case, it was much higher. It was gusting to 20-something knots, I believe, 24, 28 knots. I think I do have some audio from this, so we can listen to some of that if you'd like. Here we go.
Direct VLOC.
VLOC, 7 Delta Bravo.
And over 7 Delta Bravo, verify you have the rifle weather.
Delta Bravo.
This is not
Outcome
it.
2541, do you copy?
Flat.
It was wind shear, gain or loss of 5 knots, wind 290 at 8.
Roger.
79 Aspen ground, taxi to ramp via Alpha, and have a good day.
Thanks, we'll try.
Push that 339, let's get you that outbound now.
Give us a minute to get the parking.
Push that 339, roger.
ILS approach at Rifle 7 Hotel Bravo.
5 Whiskey Foxtrot, turn left heading 320.
320, November 115, Whiskey Fox.
Okay, here's the accident airplane, Whiskey Foxtrot.
X-ray Alpha Victor Alpha, Lima flying at 310, descend and maintain 16,000.
310, 16,000.
You know what? I thought that I had an edited version of that, and I think I'm playing the wrong version. This one's like 31 minutes long. I'm not gonna play 31 minutes of audio. I'll tell you what, when I find that, I'll put that in the show notes and you can listen to it yourself. But I do apologize for that. Interesting. I don't know where that clip came from. So anyway, Whiskey Foxtrot basically came in for an approach, and they went around because the wind gusts were higher than their limits, I guess. And so they were executing a miss, came back around for another attempt. The ceiling, I guess, was high enough, so it was basically a couple thousand feet at least. Visual conditions, basically, once they... The initial part of the instrument approach, from what I gather, they were in instrument meteorological conditions. But once they started down going down to the minimum descent altitude, they broke out, so you could see the airport, see the runway. But the case, or the big issue in this case, I'm gathering, is the very strong winds, kind of a right quartering tailwind. And I believe the controller said that the average wind in the last minute was something like 290 or 320. So basically a tailwind, steady like at 16, gusting to 24. So you have a lot of tailwind. The other thing about the approach into Aspen is the fact that it requires much steeper descent rates than a normal stabilized approach. And that in itself is dangerous. And then if you combine that with a tailwind, that means that your descent rates even have to be more steep because that wind is pushing you toward the runway. And so they continued for their second approach into the airport, and apparently, well, I don't know. I'm not sure what happened, but they hit the runway and then they cartwheeled or did a roll and came to a stop upside down. The thing was all on fire, and as I mentioned, 3 occupants on board the airplane, all pilots. One died, the co-pilot, and 2 of them have been seriously injured. I believe they're still in the hospital. So we'll have to find out more about the incident and the investigation when details are made available. Okay, and the other thing I thought was interesting was a Saudi Arabian 767 makes an emergency landing at Madinah with partial gear up. As I mentioned, the 767-300 with 315 people on board. They had to make an emergency landing because the landing gear, the right main, did not come down. Here, I'm trying to find my Aviation Herald. There we go. And let's see, they received an unsafe indication for the right-hand main gear aboard of the approach at about 3:30 local time. The aircraft entered a hold to, and this is in the morning, I believe, 3:30 a.m., because there's a video and some pictures here, and a video taken by a bystander for their landing, which I'll have a link in the show notes for. And it looks like it's at night. So they went into a holding pattern to work the relevant checklists. The crew was unable to resolve the problem, and the aircraft subsequently positioned for a third approach and performed a partial gear-up landing at Medina. I'm not sure how you pronounce that. The aircraft came to a stop on the runway, resting on left main and nose gear and right-hand engine. Now, the picture that I see here, I say it came to rest on the engines and the right engine and the left main gear, because the nose gear is not even touching the ground. It's probably several feet off the ground based on this picture I'm looking at here. Emergency slides are out, and they had an emergency evacuation. And of course, what do you get when you have an emergency evacuation? You have injuries. 29 passengers received injuries, and 11 of them were taken to hospitals, and the others treated on scene. And so I'll have a link to that in the show notes as well. You can read all about it yourself. Okay, moving on. Oh, this is interesting. UK, United Kingdom aviation authorities are investigating claims by an airline pilot that his plane was almost struck by a rugby ball-like shape, which was bright silver and metallic looking. And let's see, as he flew at an altitude of 34,000 feet near Heathrow Airport. Although the pilot and the airline have not been named, the plane involved was an Airbus A320, and the incident took place at 18:35 on the 13th of July, 2013, so about 6 months ago, 20 miles west of the airport over Berkshire, where 2 other unexplained UFOs were pictured 1 month earlier. Experts believe that due to the plane's altitude, it probably wasn't taking off or landing from Heathrow, but was probably traveling between another UK airport and the continent. The pilot estimated that the UFO avoided the plane by just a few feet, streaking over the top of the cockpit. When the pilot contacted air traffic control, they could offer no explanation, as no other aircraft was in the area at the time. Meteorological balloons, toy balloons, and military craft were also ruled out, and the sighting remains unexplained. So there we go, an unidentified flying object. And, I do believe in UFOs, because UFO stands for unidentified flying object, and that's what this pilot saw. Now, was it an alien from some other planet or some other solar system? I don't know. I don't think so, but interesting event. And again, that was in July of last year. Another interesting event, and kind of icky. Human body parts fell from the sky in the city of Jeddah on Sunday. with police saying they could be the remains of a person trapped in an airplane's wheel bay. Police received a telephone call at 2:30 a.m. from a witness reporting the fall of human remains at an intersection in Mushrafa neighborhood in the Red Sea City. Let's see. Initial indications were that the remains fell from a plane's landing gear. The investigation is ongoing. In a desperate attempt to cross borders, some people at poorly monitored airports climb inside the bays, holding the landing gear of planes. Most of them freeze to death once the aircraft reach cruising altitude, but some survive, and we've talked about that before on this show. So that is a shame. Let's see. Let's talk about one more incident here, at least, that I have set aside. And, okay, here. Air India. An Air India Airbus A320-200 was flying from Guwahati to Delhi with 173 people on board. It could not land in Delhi due to weather and diverted to Jaipur, Jaipur, which is also in India, about 125 nautical miles southwest of Delhi. By the time the aircraft arrived at Jaipur, visibility at Jaipur had reduced below minimum as well. The crew, however, needed to land in Jaipur, being unable to reach another aerodrome with the fuel remaining. In other words, they used their divert fuel, and now they don't have any remaining fuel. They got to get it on the ground. While landing on Jaipur's runway 27 at about 9:30 p.m. local time, the aircraft burst a number of tires, veered left off the runway, and the left-hand wing collided with an obstacle, reportedly a tree, before the aircraft came to a stop. No injuries occurred. The aircraft received substantial damage to its left wing. So, just thought I'd mention that interesting incident. And then we've talked about this in the past couple of episodes. The LAM, the LAM E190, Embraer 190, that was over Botswana, Namibia, on the 29th of November of last year. And the Aviation Herald received the preliminary report from Namibia's investigator in charge under the condition not to publish the 2-page report, which was signed on December 18th. The preliminary report states the aircraft carried 28 passengers and 6 crew and was en route at flight level 380 in contact with Gaborone Area Air Traffic Control. Radar data show that after passing the mandatory reporting point Exedu in Gaborone's FIR, the aircraft commenced a sudden descent from flight level 380. The report states, number 1, the aircraft was operating at normal conditions and no mechanical faults were detected. 2, minutes before the crash, the first officer left the cockpit for the lavatory and only the captain remained on the flight deck. Number 3, the altitude was manually selected 3 times from 38,000 feet to the final 592 feet, which is below ground elevation. 4, the autothrottle was manually re-engaged and throttle level automatically retarded and set to idle. 5, the airspeed was manually selected several times until the end of the recording, which remained close to VMO, which is the velocity maximum operating speed. The speed brake handle parameter indicates it was commanded to open the spoiler panels and to remain in this position until the end of the recording. This was manually commanded as the parameter monitors the handle position. So it wasn't something that accidentally popped up, that it was something that was manually extended. And number 7, during all these actions, there was an audible low and high chimes, as well as repeated banging on the cockpit door as an indication for the call to enter the cockpit. The conclusion by the Namibian investigation team is that all action observed from the recorders requires knowledge of the aircraft's automatic flight systems, as the entire descent was performed with the autopilot engaged. This displays a clear intent. The reason for all of these actions is unknown and the investigation is still ongoing. So apparently the report is just confirming that the captain basically committed suicide and homicide by killing the 28 passengers and 5 other crew members along with himself, which is very, very sad. Okay, let's see, anything else here that I want to talk about before we move on to some... Oh, wait, we have some more news here. I'm sorry. Let me go back to my news page. This was interesting, and I think somebody sent this to me. Maybe it was a tweet or something on Facebook. I don't remember. I didn't write it down. I'm sorry. But this is a man. His name is Bill Overstreet. He is a famed World War II fighter pilot. He just died this past Sunday. He was 92 years old. He gained fame for flying beneath the Eiffel Tower's arches during the war in pursuit of a German aircraft. And here, let me play a little bit of this National Public Radio interview. Maybe not. No. Okay. I will not do that because, number one, I have not received permission, and number two, it won't play. So here's the text of the transcript. Audie Corner says, "We end this hour with a remembrance of a daring World War II flight that lifted the spirits of the French people and of the humble man who flew it. In 1944, American fighter pilot William Overstreet of the 357th Fighter Group was on a mission in Nazi-occupied territory. Flying his P-51 Mustang, Overstreet was escorting American bombers through France when a dogfight broke out. Overstreet broke away to pursue an enemy German plane. It started about 30,000 feet, and this was a half-an-hour dogfight which could or would end up going through the streets of Paris and conclude itself through a pursuit through the Eiffel Tower, where Bill shot down the German pilot." Yes, you heard that right, from the stratosphere down through the arches of the Eiffel Tower. And Bill Overstreet in this interview said, this is him talking, he, meaning the German pilot, figured I'd try to get around and he'd have time to get away. He was wrong. I was right behind him, right under the Eiffel Tower with him. And when he pulled up, I did get him. But that's a huge space. That's not close at all. It's plenty of room to go under the Eiffel Tower. But it makes a good story. So apparently a very modest gentleman. You don't hear about too many people flying airplanes under the base of the Eiffel Tower. And not only did he do that, but he was in pursuit of a German Messerschmitt, I believe. And he followed him underneath the Eiffel Tower. And then as they were pulling back up, after exiting the other side, Bill Overstreet shot the German pilot down. So I had not heard of this, but apparently it's quite legendary. And the Paris citizenry actually rose up in defiance of the Germans for a period of 3 days, celebrating that victory. The French people never forgot Overstreet's courage. In 2009, so just 4 years ago, France presented William Overstreet with that country's highest award, the Legion of Honor. Overstreet was a very modest man. He accepted the medal in memory of servicemen who died in the war. A friend of his, Pastor Clemens, says, "Bill was selfless. He was authentic. He knew who he was. I was there when he died. I felt his last heartbeat. We will never see the likes of these men again." He died in Roanoke, Virginia, this past Sunday. He was 92 years old. So a very, very cool story. As I mentioned, I had not heard about this legendary flight flying underneath the Eiffel Tower in Paris. Well, how about some good news? This was sent to me, I think it was a link that Marshall Gruskin on Twitter sent me, and it is from Forbes.com. It says, if there's a bright side to the looming pilot and aviation mechanic shortages, it's that young people with a dream to fly or fix airplanes can look to a brighter future in an exciting and challenging field. For some time now, aviation professionals have worried privately that turbulence in the aviation industry with layoffs, furloughs, wage and benefit cuts affecting wide swaths of the industry was going to result in too few men and women choosing to become pilots and mechanics. Combined with a predicted global growth in aviation, the decrease in the numbers of trainees, both civilian and military, is creating what many see as a looming shortage of both pilots and mechanics. And then the writer of this article says that in their opinion, the shortage may have arrived as this person travels around the country speaking with aviation professionals seeking to fill jobs in all types of aviation, from general aviation to corporate to air taxi and airline. The fretting these days is real. Almost everyone seeking to fill a pilot or mechanic opening has remarked on the difficulty of finding qualified applicants. The reasons for the decrease are varied. For pilots, the change and the experience requirements enacted as a result of the Continental/Colgan crash outside Buffalo, New York in 2009, the global demand for pilots, with some foreign airlines offering significantly higher pay to U.S. pilots than U.S. airlines, and the aging pilot population, me, with many reaching the mandatory retirement age of 65. Don't push it. I still have 10 years to go. The cost of pilot training is also a barrier to many would-be aviators. Students seeking to fly frequently pay for flying lessons on top of already hefty college tuition. So basically the article is saying, hey, it's looking bright. This pilot shortage that many of us have been hearing about for decades is actually occurring. And that's a good thing. Maybe not in the short term for the people trying to operate airplanes and not being able to find qualified pilots, but for us who are already flying professionally in the airlines and other aspects of aviation, and those of you listening right now who want to become airline pilots, this is a good thing. Things are going to improve. I have something in my throat now. The wages are going to go up. Benefits are going to be increased, and this is a good time. If you have a passion for flying, it's a good time to get into it. So, just wanted to mention that article that was sent to me by Marshall Gruskin. Thank you, sir. And I think it's time for a break. It looks like my battery needs to be recharged, the laptop battery. Many of you say you like watching these podcasts because they're real. You know, you have the gardeners outside with the weed whackers and the toilets flushing and the birds chirping and all that kind of stuff. And, well, here's some realism for you. I got something in my throat right now. It's hard for me to talk. But anyway, I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pause the podcast and, go and, while it's still light outside, walk over to a place not too far from here, as long as it's not too cold out there, and grab something to eat. And I think it's a craft brewery, so they should have some good beer as well. And then I'll be back to record the rest of the show. Let's see, we're already at 55 minutes or so, maybe a little bit less than that. And feedback is going to take at least that long, perhaps longer. It's going to be another long show. So for those of you who like my long shows, you're going to love it, because I really want to try to get as much feedback done as possible on this next segment. So I'll stop talking and I'll be right back. Well, hello. I'm back, but as you can see from my surroundings, if you're watching the video, or perhaps maybe even those with critical ears, they can hear the difference and sense that I'm somewhere other than I was when I started this podcast, or this episode. And I am no longer in Flint, Michigan. I am, what did I do here? I went to get something to eat. I was hungry and thirsty, and walked over around a bunch of snowdrifts to this, what was it called? Redwood Steakhouse, I believe, in Flint, not too far from the hotel. Had a wonderful dinner and some wonderful beer as well. Walked back to the hotel, and I got back to my room, and I thought, I am just so tired. And I'm sure that my listeners will give me a break and let me just relax and get a good night's sleep. And that's what I did. And the next day, early morning, get up and sign in or pick up at the hotel. Went from Flint to Atlanta, and then we went to Melbourne, Florida, and back again, and ended up in our trip in Atlanta. and got home and put in a request for some overtime flying. And within an hour of my request for overtime flying, I got a call from Acme Scheduling, and they said, hey, we have a trip for you. And so I quickly looked at it on the computer, and I thought, that's not bad. So it's a 2-day trip. I left this morning early again and went to Philadelphia and then back to Atlanta, and then ended up here in Memphis, Tennessee. So, let's see. The weather up in Philadelphia, not so great, not so hot, literally. It wasn't that cold, though. I think it was about, I don't know, it was in the upper 30s and 40s, whatever. It was pretty decent. And, no, wait a minute, take that back. I'm thinking about it here in Memphis. Oh, that's right. When we left Atlanta, the temperature was about 30 degrees in Philadelphia. When we got there, it was between 30 and 32 degrees. And they were showing light freezing rain and low ceilings. And it was, just a yucky day up there. And we did everything we could do to prevent ice from forming on any of the control surfaces of the airplane or any of the critical surfaces of the airplane using anti-ice. Wing anti-ice coming in. And my co-pilot, a different one now, a different trip, his name is not Brandon. Brandon was my last co-pilot. Peter. Peter did the walk around, and he said, unfortunately, Jeff, the ailerons have a coating of ice, so there was ice here and there. So that meant that we had to get de-iced because they were calling for light freezing rain in the observation. And so we finally got all loaded up, left the gate, and then entered the very long queue, the very long line to the de-icing pad at Philadelphia. And we ended up taking off about an hour late and arriving in Atlanta almost an hour late. And then we ran, almost literally, from our arrival gate to our departure gate because we were switching airplanes. We flew an MD-90 up to Philadelphia and back to Atlanta, and our flight to Memphis was an MD-88. So we had to switch concourses and quickly do our pre-flight procedures and planning and look at all the flight planning notes and notices to airmen and all those important things that we, have to review. Briefed the flight attendants, talked to the passengers, let them know that we were doing everything we could to get the show on the road as quickly as possible. Then I was reviewing the logbook, and I noticed, the auxiliary power unit does not work. And when I was doing my walk around outside, I noticed there was no, what we call a huffer, or an external air unit for engine start. So we had to wait for that. It got there, and we finally got the engine started, and off we went to Memphis, arriving about 25 to 30 minutes late. So that's where I am here, not too far at all from the pyramid, and I think I've mentioned this in past episodes, the significance of the pyramid here in Memphis, Tennessee. And for those of you who are knowledgeable of history and geography, you'll know that the city of Memphis, Tennessee was named for, or named after, or in honor of, I'm not sure which, or maybe all, of the ancient capital of Egypt, Memphis. And of course, Egypt has pyramids, and so that's why we have a pyramid here in Memphis. I bet if you asked your average Memphisonian, is that what you would be if you live in Memphis? If you asked them, what is the significance of the pyramid building? I bet that a large number would probably not have any idea. So, here I am. Let's continue with the show. Again, we've already talked about several news items, and it is now time. Well, before we go with our feedback, let's do this. Let's talk about Audible.com. For you, the listeners of the Airline Pilot Guy Show, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. And I received this from Lisa, and she writes, "Hi, Jeff. I enjoy your APG podcast very much. I have not missed an episode in years as I started listening when it was still the Catholic Pilot. I'm an active catechist as well as a private pilot. You included my feedback years ago regarding my brother-in-law who was a firefighter in New York City on 9/11. I'm writing to suggest you use a different audio clip for your Audible ad. I've been using Audible for years on my iPhone and I love it. The narrator's voice makes a huge difference, and the clip that you used in episode 98, the last episode, has a pretty boring sound. You, on the other hand, have a very pleasant voice, and I'm sure that helps your fan base, which seems to be growing in leaps and bounds. The book sounds interesting, but the narrator is not helping much. How about," and she gives me a couple of suggestions here, which is great because, I have not listened to a lot of Audible books myself, so I'm kind of a newbie when it comes to making suggestions for great picks for your Audible trial. And she says, "How about the Burl Markham book, West with the Night? That's a good aviation story." She also names Fearless and Flight of Passage as two others. Thanks again for your dedication to the podcast. Lisa Reinhardt in New Jersey. So, let's listen to a little clip of, where are you? Okay, here it is. West with the Night, the unabridged version and the Audible audio edition by Burl Markham. And let's see, Anna Fields is the narrator for this book. So we're going to play a sample now.
Half-raised arms beckoning, the shadow of a dog slouching between the flares. I remember these things, and the men who greeted me at Nungwe. But I took off again after dawn without learning anything about the success of their operations or the wealth of their mine. It wasn't that they meant to keep those things concealed. It was just that they had other things to think about that night, and none of them had to do with gold. I had been working out of Nairobi as a freelance pilot with the Muthaiga Country Club as my headquarters. Even in 1935, it wasn't easy to get a plane in East Africa, and it was almost impossible to get very far across country without one. There were roads, of course, leading in a dozen directions out of Nairobi. They started out...
Okay, so that's a little sample of the book West with the Night by Burl Markham. Now, there's a little, let me read this editorial review. Burl Markham, the first person to fly solo across the Atlantic from east to west, describes her childhood on a farm in Kenya, her apprenticeship as a horse trainer, and her later career as a pioneer aviator who piloted passengers and supplies in a small plane to remote corners of Africa. Of her memoir, Ernest Hemingway said, "She has written so well and marvelously well that I was completely ashamed of myself as a writer. She can write rings around all of us who consider ourselves writers." Wow. Pretty high praise from a writer named Ernest Hemingway. So, if you decide to sign up for your free Audible trial, do that by going to audibletrial.com/airlinepilotguy and choose this book. This sounds pretty interesting. West with the Night by Burl Markham. And I'll have a link to your Audible trial in the show notes. And thank you, Lisa, again for your suggestion. And anybody else out there who is an Audible member already, and you've listened to some recommendable books, would you please recommend them to me so I can pass that on to the audience? All right, so let's go back to this and to the APG inbox. Mike Lawrence. Oh, I can't do that yet, right? I have to do the sound effect because it just wouldn't be right if I didn't. So I'm going to bring this volume back up. And go over here to this and play this.
Captain, incoming message.
Thank you. Okay, this is from Mike Lawrence. I ran across this YouTube video from one of the glider guys I follow. Baleka, or Baleka, Balleka, a.k.a. Matt Wright, is a Freight Dog 747 pilot who spends much of his free time gliding in his adopted home of Britain. Baleka's a very accomplished videographer and posts some of the best gliding videos I've ever seen. I've attached a link to one of his most recent 747 videos. It's a flight into and layover in Hong Kong. I think both you and your listeners will appreciate the amazing work that Matt does with his GoPro cameras. The production value of Matt's videos is top-notch and rivals that of documentary filmmakers. Spend a few minutes immersed in HD and the beautifully edited adventure he shares with us mere mortals. I hope you enjoy. And then he has a link here, so thank you, Mike. And I'll play just a little bit. Of course, playing the video really doesn't do it, a lot of good because it's the visual aspect of it. But I'm just going to do it anyway. Here we go. It says something about in Hong Kong. And here's an ad for BSW. Anyways, looks like it's outside of, or a shot from the cockpit through the window, a side window it appears. Beautiful countryside and beautiful clouds and blue sky and really nice music. This clip, or this video, is 5 minutes and 38 seconds long. I'm not going to play the whole thing because if you're just listening to the audio podcast, well, if you're actually watching the video podcast, you can't see this either. So anyway, there we go. I'm going to go ahead and stop it. So I'll have a link to this in the show notes. So thanks again, Mike Lawrence, for sending me that clip. Okay, here is a feedback from Brad, and he writes something about packages. Let's take a listen.
Hey, Captain Jeff. Brad Larson, Phoenix, Arizona. Giving you some voice feedback again. Thank you for your awesome podcast. Love listening to it. Really informative. Just had a couple questions for you tonight. One, are you ever required to take packages for FedEx or UPS on your plane? Now, somewhere I thought I'd heard that's how they help get overnight packages across the United States so quickly. Is that true, or did somebody tell me something not true? And secondly, you travel all over the place. What is your favorite hotel to stay at? And I guess if you have a favorite, which hotel is it, or which chain of hotels is it? Anyways, hope you're have a wonderful Christmas holiday and enjoying the weather there in Atlanta. I know I'm glad to be here in Arizona where it's not snowing. And talk to you later. Thank you. Bye.
Hey, thanks, Brad. And as you can tell, Brad sent this to me before Christmas, the 19th of December, I believe. And I did have a wonderful, and I've talked about that on the last couple of podcasts, had a great Christmas holiday with the family and time after. Actually, of course, as you know, I've mentioned it many times, Christmas just starts on the 25th. So my 12 days of Christmas were great, were grand. So thanks for asking. I hope yours were as well. Packages. I know that, I've never seen a package from UPS or FedEx on board an Acme airplane. But I have seen U.S. Postal Service packages and mail. And we used to have a huge contract with the U.S. Postal Service. And I think now one of the big freight companies like FedEx does the bulk of the airmail for the U.S. Postal Service. But we used to have a big contract with them. And then I still see certain flights when I'm doing the walk around when they're loading stuff from the bag loader, or the bag loader. Is that what they call it? Belt loader. I see these big, what would you call them? Cartons that says USPS on it, and a bunch of mail in it. And so I know that we still do some of that. I don't think we do as much as we used to. Now, it could be that we do offer an expedited package delivery service at Acme, and it's possible that perhaps some of the companies like FedEx and UPS may occasionally use the major airlines to convey or carry the package for them if it's time critical. But I don't know the real answer to that. I don't think that we do that on a regular basis. What was the other thing that you asked? I should have been taking notes. Oh well. I don't want to play the thing again, so I hope that I answered your question, Brad. Appreciate your feedback, and hope to hear from you again soon. Okay. Hey, hold it down. Got a podcast going here. Somebody out in the hallway making a lot of noise. Okay, this is from Ahmad Dan Hamidou. Hamadou. How am I doing, Hamadou? Hello, Jeff. I've finally gotten a chance to visit your website, and I have to say, the view is absolutely friendly. Refreshing visually. I love the simple layout, and that is mostly the work of Arash in Ottawa, and as informing as it is entertaining. Well done. I'm doing a device survey ahead of shopping for Android phone to replace my Symbian phone, which is losing more and more support worldwide in terms of apps and related services offered. I would have loved an iOS phone, but that is the least popular in my country, Nigeria. Android leads, followed by Windows Media, and then iOS. Now I have a chance to check out all those interesting show notes you always mention. Cheers. Well, thanks for the kind words, Ahmad, for the website. I hope everybody is enjoying it. And one of the nice things about the theme that Arash used to kind of spruce up things is a responsive theme, which means that when you're looking at it on your smartphone, whether it be a Android, Windows phone, iOS, or whatever, or your tablet device, it should kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Reformat itself to be the best presentation based on the display size, etc. So I'm hoping that it's working out for everybody out there. Okay, let's move on with Robert Touchtone. And he said, thought you might find this interesting. And enjoy the shows. Keep up the great work you do. I better click on this because I don't think I loaded this up before I started recording this. So here we go. I'm going to the link, and it's the Washington Post. Flights of fancy inside the intense world of virtual pilots. On Saturday, while the Washington area's airports teem with travelers heading home for the holidays. This is on December 20th. About a dozen air traffic controllers will orchestrate the complex dance of passenger jets as they take off and land. It's a complicated job, requiring sustained focus to make sure nobody crashes or runs out of fuel before they taxi safely home. Not real jets, though. These are virtual ones, flown by people in their living rooms and basements all over the world. And this is me talking. And if the airline executives have their way, that's the way all the real airplanes are going to be flown too. Captain Jeff will be sitting at his home in his pajamas, in his bedroom or living room, in his lazy boy, and flying your flight. You better hope that if you're heading for a thunderstorm that I'm not off going into the kitchen, making some microwave popcorn or grabbing a beer, although they probably wouldn't want me to be drinking beer and remotely controlling your flight. I'm just joking, of course. I'm not really joking. I'm sure that the airline executives would love for us to do that, but I don't think it's going to happen. I certainly hope not, anyway. Okay, back to... Well, anyway, this article here was sent by... Okay, wait. I just said who it was from. Okay, Robert sent this, and it's about the beautiful, wonderful world of PC simulator flying and, of course, the interaction with the virtual air traffic control people, and I think, what's it called, VATSIM. And we had a great video from one of our listeners, and he was showing one of his many recordings on doing one of these flights using the service VATSIM, and it's fascinating. It's really, really cool. I'm amazed at all the stuff that you can do in the PC simming world. And by the way, I'll have somebody kind of challenges me about PC simming later in the show here. We'll talk about that later. Okay, so thank you, Robert. Episode number 95 feedback is from Lee. Sorry for the delay, but to answer your question from my audio feedback in episode 95 about Embry-Riddle having a campus in Germany, they do. The program is called Embry-Riddle Worldwide. Basically, they offer some classes taught on their base campus, and the rest are offered online. The nice thing is that there is a campus on just about every Air Force base worldwide, including some deployed locations. So you can take classes wherever the Air Force sends you. Thanks for playing my feedback last month, and thanks for everything you do. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Thank you, Lee. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to you as well. This is from Milad Ataya. Milad is from Libya. He says, I've been listening to your podcasts since I started my English language learning last summer. I have to say that I am not only interested in listening to your show, but I also learned a lot of vital things about aviation, which is my dream to become a commercial pilot. In this December, I closed my English chapter as an English student, and now I am ready to enroll in one of the flight schools. Actually, I'm struggling to find the school that provides good training and deserves the money. I made some connections with British schools like Flying Time in Brighton. It looks pretty good, but expensive if you compare with prices in Europe and other countries. Then I found some schools in Serbia, but I'm afraid I need to find more schools and more options. Currently, I'm looking for other places in Europe, like France. Please, Captain Jeff, I need your advice and recommendation on this issue of finding flying schools, in addition to attaching me, if you ever know, with nice schools based in Europe or other places in the world, except from the United States. Thank you for your attention. Best regards, Milad. So, I don't really know how to help Milad. I don't know anything about any of these flying schools abroad, over in Europe or in Britain or Serbia or anywhere else for that matter. But perhaps you do. You, listening to me right now, you have me in your ears, your earbuds, your headphones, or you're listening to me on your car stereo system, or you might be sitting in front of your computer, your laptop, your tablet, whatever you're listening to me on. And you actually may have some crucial information for Milad. You might know something about a school to recommend, and perhaps maybe ways to afford the tuition for these flight schools. So if you do, you know how to get that information to me. You send it to feedback@airlinepilotguy.com. If you want to do audio feedback, that's perfectly fine. I love that. But if you're not set up for that, or you think you have a bad voice or whatever, then just send me an email. Again, feedback@airlinepilotguy.com. So, Milad, keep listening. He sent this to me on December 22nd, and I hope that I'll receive some information from the listeners, and I'll pass that on to you. Okay, Caesar writes, I've been watching your podcast on YouTube since episode 60, and I really enjoy it. You're a great person to let us airline enthusiasts into your world of flying. Keep up the great podcast. Anyway, I saw that you were in Southern California. I my phone is ringing, so I forgot to put it on Do Not Disturb. So I apologize for that. Now, some of you have said, that's one of the reasons why I love your podcast. When you hear the weed whackers and all the things going on, it just makes it seem real. Well, there you go. There's some real for you. Okay. Back to Caesar's feedback. I saw that you were in Southern California. I live about 20 minutes south of Los Alamitos in Whittier. I saw episode 97, and you talked about the Asiana NTSB hearing. I also saw the hearing shortly after it started to about 4 p.m. I agree with you. There were a lot of assumptions during the hearing. I also noticed that the Asiana reps kept beating around the bush when they were asked direct questions by the NTSB committee about several sequences during the landing. They also didn't answer the question about what each pilot's responsibilities are during the landing, such as who is watching the instruments and autothrottle. Also, I was frustrated with the Korean translator because I don't think that she clearly translated what the Asiana rep was saying into English. She was having a hard time saying things in English to the NTSB, to the point where some of the NTSB members looked at her trying to figure out what she was trying to say. I really think whoever provided the translator should have found one that was familiar with the aviation terminology and spoke clear English. I think they actually got this translator from the same company that supplied the translator to the president's visit to South Africa for Nelson Mandela's funeral. Do you remember the sign language interpreter that they had there? That obviously was it depends on who you listen to and who you believe. But they said that, oh, this is a real sign language guy. It's just that he was having some kind of a attack or stroke or something, and that's why his all his signs were nonsense or nonsensical. And then others say he's not really a real sign language person. And I think I've mentioned this before. I just thought it was kind of funny. But seriously, that was a pretty huge breach of security. I mean, he was literally within a couple feet of the President of the United States. Anyway, I digress. So yeah, I wasn't watching. I was kind of listening to it more than I was watching, but I got the same impression that you did, Caesar, about the translator that they had chosen. So anyway, well, thank you for everything you do and fly safely. And that's from Caesar in Whittier, California. One of these days, I hope to have some kind of a meetup in Southern California. So stay tuned for that. I'm going to try to get out there later this month. And if I don't make it this month, perhaps in February. And then maybe one of you can volunteer to coordinate something. That'd be great. Okay, this is from Bonnie. Oh, and the reason why I'm going to play this was kind of a personal request from her to me. And it was a very short notice thing, and I wasn't able to help her in any way. And I meant to play this on an earlier podcast so that perhaps one of you could help out. But again, I forgot, or I just never got to her feedback in an earlier episode. And she sent this to me on the 25th of December, Christmas Day. And she said, would you help me find a pilot to snap a very specific picture for my dad? Now, maybe, Bonnie, you're listening, and maybe you were able to find this for your dad. But if not, perhaps this would still be a nice gift for him, even if it didn't make it to his birthday. So this is what she said. I need a picture flying into Denver in the AM, or in the morning, as the sun hits the Rockies. I can have it framed for my dad, who briefly was a pilot for United after World War II. And then she sent me a link about her father, and he had quite an aviation career. Dad has spoken of that site. Prairie, and then boom, sky, Rocky Mountains filling up the window for years. So I would love to surprise him with a long, narrow picture of the same. Is there anyone on the Chicago to Denver route who might be able to help me? I would like to surprise my dad for his 91st birthday on January 7th. So let's see. That was a couple days ago, so I apologize, Bonnie. I forgot to mention it in the last episode. But she says, it's all my fault. If I were smarter, I would have thought of it sooner. Thank you most sincerely, Bonnie. Okay, so my listeners, if you are pilots and you fly into Denver early in the morning, early enough to catch a beautiful sunrise coming up over the Rockies, of course, the weather is going to have to be just right for that spectacular picture. But if you happen to fly and you're listening to my words right now and you can manage to snap one of those pictures, that'd be fantastic. Send it to me, feedback@airlinepilotguy.com, and then I'll send it to Bonnie. And again, Bonnie, please accept my apologies for not being able to timely get that accomplished for you. And I hope that your father had a great birthday regardless a couple days ago. So happy 91st birthday, Dad. Okay, here we go. Well, you know what? I'm going to be going into Denver at the end of this month, but I think I'm flying in sometime later in the day, well after sunrise, and and then I'm leaving in the morning and I'm heading the other direction. So I'm not going to be able to get a sunrise over the Rockies. Maybe a sunset coming in. I don't know. I'll have to look. Okay, let's move on. Let's see. Just when you heard it all. This is from Dave Derazinski, also known as Chair City Dave. And, I think I did mention this particular incident on an earlier show. And this was the Italian pilot. No, I'm sorry. It was a Pakistani International Airlines pilot, identified as Flight Captain Nushad. And maybe I didn't talk about this. I know I wanted to talk about it. Maybe I just never got around to it. If I have, you'll please pardon me for mentioning it again. Anyway, this Pakistani International Airlines pilot, or Pakistan International Airlines pilot, PIA, delayed a flight from Pakistan to New York via Manchester, England, and it was all set for an on-time departure at 6:45 in the morning on December 15th. And this captain was craving a sandwich, and he delayed the flight 2.5 hours so that the place that fixes these wonderful sandwiches, apparently, so they could fix it and drive it out to the airport and deliver it to the airplane. So, again, I don't know what happened to this guy, but I can't imagine that the managers of this airline would be very happy with the 2.5 hour delay of an international flight. So thank you, Dave, for sending that in. Here's some audio feedback from Mechanic Bob. So let's take a listen. Take it away, Mechanic Bob. Take it away, Mechanic Bob.
Hi, Captain Jeff. This is Mechanic Bob. I wanted to give you some feedback on your latest show where you talked about contaminated air in the cabin. I'll go into some details for those who aren't familiar with how an aircraft gets air in the cabin. An aircraft gets fresh air pumped in through either the APU or the engines. They have a compressor in the front, which is basically a big fan, and the air comes out of the engine after the compressor, but before it gets to the part of the engine that burns the fuel. The only contamination I've heard of is from de-ice fluid, as you mentioned, or from engine oil. I can't really think of a way that you would get contaminated air from fuel or hydraulic fluid. It would be pretty hard for that to get into the inlet. Oil could get into the air because the compressor rides on a bearing that is lubricated by oil. So if the oil leaks out, it'll get into the compressed air, and that air reaches over 500 degrees. So the oil turns to smoke pretty quickly. I think filtering the air going into the cabin wouldn't really be practical. There's an enormous amount of air that is supplied into the cabin in order to pressurize it. I don't believe you could use a regular filter to filter out the smoke you'd get from oil. It would have to be a really fine filter, such as a HEPA filter, and that would restrict the airflow way too much, and it would probably clog up very quickly with the amount of air that would have to go through it. You'd be changing filters every flight if it even lasted that long before it clogged up. There is something that modern aircraft use to treat the air coming in, and it's called an ozone converter. It basically works like a catalytic converter in your car. It's a metal can with a metallic screen on the inside that's heated by the bleed air going through it, and that it makes the screen glow red hot and incinerate contaminants which would go through it, which would otherwise be harmful for us to breathe. From my experience, it doesn't take very much oil to make the air smell bad. One drop of burnt oil would make it really smelly. I think we've all driven behind a car that's burning oil, and it's pretty unpleasant. If you're breathing contaminated air, I think you would know about it, and you'd be shutting off the bleed air from one engine or the other until you could isolate where that smell's coming from to get rid of it. And if it was a significant amount of burned oil getting into the air, it wouldn't be just a smell. You'd actually see smoke coming in. So you would be really concerned if you had a significant quantity of oil getting in there. Personally, I'd be more worried about health effects if you had an electrical fire with smoke from burned plastic insulation or some of the materials that the interior are made out of. I think that would be very toxic. I'm sure breathing burned oil is not healthy for you, but I don't think you would really breathe in a quantity that would cause any serious health implications without knowing about it. You would definitely smell it if you were breathing it in. Anyway, I hope you find this feedback helpful. I really enjoy your show, and keep it up.
I do. Thank you, Mechanic Bob, for your insight and your expertise and explaining a little bit more in depth about how the air system works for pressurization and heating and cooling in the airplane. And I love hearing your take on it. So continue to listen and continue sending me great feedback, Mechanic Bob. I think I have another piece of feedback actually from you sometime later on the list here, so hopefully we'll get to it in this episode, if not in a future episode. Okay, let's see. This is from Josh in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I hope you're still enjoying your time off. Well, no, not anymore. I'm back to work. Busy again. I too have had some time off this month, and it's been great. Alas, reality has set in, and I'm back on the road. And in fact, I'm writing this while aboard a flight. I have some questions about RNP approaches. Recently, an airline has announced that they will begin flying from Seattle to Juneau, Alaska. As I understand it, Juneau is a pretty difficult airport to operate into because of weather and terrain. I believe Alaska Airlines uses RNP, Required Navigational Performance, into Juneau, but they are the only operator certified to do this. What kind of equipment, ground-based and in the plane, is required to perform an RNP approach? What kind of certification process must an airline go through to utilize this type of approach? Would pilots have to receive special training to do this, like some other airports, Vail, Tegucigalpa, etc.? Thanks for your hard work, as always. God bless. Thanks, Josh, in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So I did a little research about it, and yes, there is an airline that I know very well, will begin flying into Juneau. And yeah, I've heard the same thing. It's a very challenging place to fly into. And I pulled up some, let's see if I can find it, some approach plates from Jeppesen. No, I'm sorry, these are FAA approach plates. And one was the RNAV GPS Victor, runway 8. And let's see, another one is the LDA X-ray, runway 8. And let's see, is this the one, same one? Yeah, so I pulled up 2 approaches. It appears that very much like, that incident that we talked about earlier here in the show, going into Aspen, this Juneau airport is situated in much the same way, that you have to approach from a certain direction, and only from that direction, and then you depart in the opposite direction, so that because the airport is located around high terrain and kind of a box canyon kind of thing. So I think when you're referring to RMP, I think what you meant was an RNAV, area navigation, or an approach that doesn't use an ILS system. And so yes, that's what they use here. And no, I don't think you have to be specially qualified. When we go through training, if you're on a fleet that uses and is qualified, you have the equipment that can utilize RNAV approaches, in this case a GPS approach. You are trained on it when you go to training, and you're fully qualified to fly it. The airplane that I fly is not qualified at this point because I think our RNAV system is not quite accurate enough to fly approaches. We can fly some visual approaches using RNAV technology, but we can't fly precision instrument approaches at this time until we get an upgraded inertial reference system or GPS system in these airplanes. But many of the airplanes in Acme's fleet do use these RNAV procedures. And again, you fly the airplane, you're trained in it, you're trained to go, and there are some exceptions. There are some places that we go that require special certification because they're just darn difficult to fly into, and I'm sure this is going to be one of them. There's probably going to have to be separate training to fly into this particular airport, and perhaps maybe even a special check airman might have to ride with you the first time that you actually fly an approach and landing at this airport. I don't know for sure. I don't know the details, but interesting question. And that's usually the way it works. At least that's the way it works at Acme Airlines. So now I've lost my place. Here we go. Here we are. So thanks again, Josh, and I hope that answered your question. This is some more audio feedback. This one is from Josh, another Josh. This one, our Josh in Nashville. And no, wait a minute. Is this the one that he sent me? No, okay, here we go. Sorry for the confusion.
Hey, Captain Jeff, it's Josh in Nashville. I hope you and all of your listeners had a really great Christmas, and hopefully you're enjoying the last few days of your vacation here before it's time to start flying again and go back to work. I actually got a chance in the last few weeks to fly in your part of the world. I have a friend that's a light sport pilot based at McCollum Field, and he took me up and we went up over to Rome and did a landing, and then over to Cherokee County, a couple touch and goes, and then back to Rome, and then I had to head back to Nashville for the day. But beautiful part of the country. It was a beautiful day to fly, and thought, Captain Jeff's down there somewhere, I'm sure, probably in his basement, recording a podcast for us, I hope. Hey, I had a question. I got a scanner for Christmas, and my brother and I were out at the airport kind of watching the planes come and go, and my brother mentioned, hey, have you ever heard this thing about interstates being used as runways in the event of a big military situation where we needed, I don't know what the situation would be, I guess, probably a Cold War mentality. He said, I know you listen to that pilot guy who has a podcast. You should ask him and see what he says. So I'm asking, Captain Jeff. I think we've all probably heard this urban legend of the interstates were built with the idea that in a wartime situation we could use them as air bases or land airplanes. What do you know? Have you heard anything about that? Is it true? Is it just an urban legend? Can you shed some light on that for us, your listeners, me and my brother, who maybe he'll be a listener after you speak into this? That's really all I have for you. Thanks again for the great podcast. I look forward to hearing what you have to say, and Happy New Year to you and to all your listeners.
Thank you, Josh. By the way, great audio quality there. and Josh is the guy that also, on a previous episode, when I was talking about the medical emergency that I had flying from Fort Myers, I believe, to LaGuardia, New York, and he compiled the audio from liveatc.net and did all the editing and everything. I think it was you, wasn't it, Josh? I think so. Yeah, pretty sure. Yeah, so thank you for that. And I think, all you have to do is go to Google or Wikipedia, as I've just done while you were talking, because I forgot to look this up. I'd heard the same darn thing, that the interstate system, and also known as the Dwight D. Eisenhower National System of Interstate and Defense Highways, and is commonly known here in the United States as the Interstate Highway System, or the Interstate Freeway System, or the Interstate System, or simply the Interstate, is a network of freeways that forms part of a national highway system in the United States. The system is named for President Dwight D. Eisenhower, who championed its formation. Construction was authorized by the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956, and the original portion was completed 35 years later. The network has been since extended, and has, as of 2010, a total length of 47,182 miles. And for those of you who prefer the metric unit, that would be 75,932 kilometers, making it the world's second longest after China's. As of 2010, about 1/4 of all vehicle miles driven in the country use the interstate system. The cost of construction has been estimated at $425 billion in 2006 dollars. Okay, so the U.S. government's effort at constructing a national network of highways began on an ad hoc basis with the passage of the Federal Aid Road Act of 1916. And let's see, let's go on here. Of course, I'm reading this just kind of while I'm trying to do my podcast episode, and I should have, as I mentioned before, done a little bit more research before I hit the record button, darn it. But I'd heard the same thing, that there are certain intervals of the highway that had to be at least 1 mile long and straight for use as landing sites. And I thought that was true. And I think what I need to do here is go back one page, back to my Google search. You can do the same thing if you want to follow along, or you can use Bing if you prefer. And here is something entitled 1 Mile in 5 Debunking the Myth. Uh-oh. Huh. I don't know if 10% of the Russian government's income comes from the sale of vodka. I don't know if a cow can go upstairs but not downstairs. And I certainly don't know if a duck's quack doesn't echo. What? But I do know the following statement is false. The Eisenhower interstate system requires that 1 mile in every 5 must be straight. These straight sections are usable as airstrips in times of war or other emergencies. False though it is, this fact has become a fixture of internet websites with names such as "You Probably Didn't Know That" and "Weird Fact Heaven." For a historian, even an unofficial one, who believes that a fact should be, by definition, factual, what is particularly frustrating is that everyone seems to know this fact. People, including those whose eyes glaze over if I ever mention General Roy Stone or the virtually important statewide highway surveys of the mid-1930s, get a twinkle in their eye when I mention the interstate highway system. Did you know, they say to me cheerily as I grit my teeth, that 1 in every 5 miles, ... Okay, so let's see if we can get down to the bottom line here. Under a provision of the Defense Highway Act of 1941, the Army, Air Force, and the Public Roads Administration, the PRA, now the Federal Highway Administration, operated a flight strip program. In a 1943 presentation to the American Association of State Highway Officials, Commissioner of Public Roads Thomas McDonald explained how it worked. A flight strip consists of one runway laid down in the direction of the prevailing wind and a shelter with telephone for the custodians at the site and for itinerant flyers in an emergency. Fuel storage facilities are not provided. Let's see. The flight strips were designed for easy access to public highways and to provide unmistakable landmarks that could be followed easily by a pilot. Flight strips varied in size. The smallest, 150 feet wide, 46 meters, and 4,000 feet, 1,220 meters long, with the length increased by 500 feet for each 1,000 feet of elevation, were designed for tactical aircraft such as medium bombers. A larger flight strip could accommodate heavy bombers such as the B-17 and the B-24, while still larger strips were designed for heavier classes of aircraft. Let's see. In that spirit, Congress considered including a flight strip program in the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1944, the law that authorized designation of a national system of interstate highways. However, the 1944 Act did not include the flight strip program. So some references to the 1 out of 5 law attribute to the Federal Aid Highway Act of 1956. But that's not a fact. I mean, it didn't happen, basically, is the bottom line here. Okay, so let me continue reading. Okay, so that's one take on this question about the interstate highway system. And let's go to Snopes. I always like to go to Snopes, SNOPES.com, to kind of debunk or confirm rumors or things that you hear on the internet, or somebody sends you an email and you think, is that really true? And here we go. It says, landing of hope and glory. Here's the claim. The American interstate highway system was designed to be used for emergency airstrips in the case of war. And then there's a big red button and it says false. So, numerous folks swear that interstate highways in the United States must be designed so that 1 in every 5 miles is perfectly straight and flat. According to this whispered bit of facetious lore, if the U.S. ever comes under attack, those straight, flat stretches will be used as landing strips. Belief in this crazy idea should fail anyone's logic test. It makes no sense to render inoperable the interstate highway system during times of domestic crisis. Moving troops and supplies on the ground would be too important an activity to curtail just to land planes. The U.S. is riddled with any number of small private airfields that could be pressed into service if the need arose. Okay, so here's another reference or source that says that is a bunch of bunk. So now, Josh, you can tell, was it your brother? That nope, it is not a fact. It is not true. Although I must admit that I was one of those that thought that was a fact until now. So I'm glad you mentioned it, because I'm always looking for the truth in everything. And speaking of truth, the way you pronounce the word Potable is not potable, it's
potable.
Do you hear that? Say it again.
Potable.
Exactly. I'm not joking. We had an airplane today, the airplane that we took up to Philadelphia and back, that the potable water system was in op. Every single person that used the word potable today pronounced it potable. I wanted to stick a stick in my eye, poke a stick in my eye, or my ear. And you know what? You know what I said? I didn't say anything. I understand now that my quest for people to pronounce the word
potable
is a losing battle. It's unrealistic. I guess I'm just going to have to start saying potable. What are you going to do? Let's just do this. Let's call it drinking water instead of potable.
Potable.
Thank you. Okay. Time to move on. I know, sometimes I get sidetracked getting these ruts. Thanks again, Josh, for your question, and I hope that helped. Okay, this is from, how are we doing on the time? Yeah, we're doing all right. This is from Tom. He says, I really enjoy your podcast. I have a question about something mentioned in APG 97. One of the news items was about a 737-800 landing in Madison under wintry conditions that apparently couldn't make the turn onto the taxiway at the end of the runway and went off the paved surface into the tundra. How do they pull the plane back onto the paved surface again? If they just put tugs or tractors on it and pull it onto the paved surface, don't they risk damaging the landing gear? Later in the podcast, it was mentioned that Boeing doesn't want tugs used routinely to pull their planes to the end of the runway instead of taxiing before starting engines because of the strain on the landing gear. Look forward to your answer. This is Tom from St. Charles, Illinois. And Tom, honestly, I don't know. Not sure how they do it. I'm assuming that they connect a tug or perhaps maybe some kind of a strap system to the fuselage. Maybe they, I guess it depends on the condition of the ground. If it's like super soft, muddy ground and the airplane, just sunk into it, I guess they can't just attach a tug to it and just pull it out. They have to do something more, clever, like perhaps getting some cranes and then putting some kind of wide straps around a couple points around the fuselage and then lifting that up and then perhaps moving that whole crane system with the airplane suspended from the straps. I don't know. Who knows? If you're listening to this, I'm not answering a lot of these questions, am I? I'm asking for way too much help on the show. But hey, that's one of the great things about this podcast. It's not just me. I don't know everything. Obviously, I know a lot, but I have no experience at all. Thank goodness. And how they get an airplane that has gone off the runway back onto it. And I hope not to actually have that happen to me so that I get firsthand knowledge of it in the future. So if you are one of those people that knows a lot of information about this sort of thing, let me know. Am I on base here or off base? Let me know. Sorry, Tom, I don't have the answer right now, but I'm sure that our listeners will help. Moving on. Brian writes, first I just wanted to comment on Reese's question from episode 97 regarding the use of heading hold on transoceanic flights. You were correct that there are very few reasons that a crew would use this mode on an oceanic crossing. I think you hit the nail on the head with your guess that what he saw was in fact the crew simply sinking the heading bug with the heading being flown by the FMC. The only other possibility that I can think of using heading hold is to avoid bad weather. It's possible that if there's a storm over the route of flight, Oceanic ATC might clear a plane to deviate around the weather, which might be done by using heading hold to fly around the weather and then return to lateral nav or LNAV mode once clear of the weather. Yeah, that's what I think too, Brian. Second, with the last week's discussion of ILS systems, I have a quick question about RNAV/GPS approaches and how they work. When flying a GPS approach, is vertical guidance provided by the pressure altimeter or from a triangulated altitude from the GPS system? If it uses the pressure altimeter, couldn't a minor difference in air pressure between the approach fix location and the weather station location, or even a mistaken altimeter barometric pressure setting, lead to a potentially dangerous inaccuracy in the vertical guidance? Thanks, Brian. I'm not absolutely sure, sir, because the airplane, as I explained earlier, the airplane that I fly doesn't use the RNAV system. We don't have GPS. Well, actually, I take that back. A couple of the MD-9s that we have actually do have GPS in it. But again, we have not been trained in this airplane to fly RNAV instrument approaches. So, and just off the top of my head, I think that the vertical path is calculated based on position information and not barometric altitude information. Although the limiting altitude, the decision height or decision altitude, or the derived decision altitude if you're doing CAMPA procedures, or the minimum descent altitude, etc., are ultimately defined by the barometric altimeter. But the actual slope or flight path, vertical flight path, I believe is calculated by the position information of the RNAV/GPS system. And if you know the answer out there, if you're one of those guys that's really smart, or gals, and you know the answer, send me some feedback and help me help. You can really tell, that in an effort to catch up with a lot of this feedback that you guys have sent me and gals have sent me, I apparently didn't do a lot of research, and I'm sorry for that. So I'm doing the best I can, though. So, here's the thing I was going to tell you about. Somebody wrote in, and I think it was a comment on one of the YouTube videos. He said, "Follow your YouTube podcast regularly." Oh, by the way, and I don't mean to be critical here, and I'm not. Well, I guess I am. But when you write something or text something and you use all capital letters or all uppercase letters, that's essentially in the internet world as yelling. You're yelling or screaming something. So just in case you're one of those who likes to type with the caps lock on, I'm just letting you know. I mean, it doesn't bother me because I write in all caps. So reading something that's in all caps, I get it. I understand. And I know you're not yelling or screaming. But I'm just warning you, there are people out there who are going to get on your case for doing that. So just so you know, maybe you didn't know that. Okay. So this person follows my YouTube podcasts regularly. I think there's a lot to learn from a 4-bar pro like you. Thank you. However, I noted you seem to have some aversion against flight simulators. I would really like to know why. Since there are lots of professional ATP types like you who, after a flight or just for the heck of it, start up their Microsoft Flight Simulator or FSX or X-Plane and go fly virtually. Keep up the good work and happy landings and tailwinds. Hall, AMS. Is that your last name? Hall AMS? Well, anyway, Hall. Again, please don't be offended by my pointing out that writing in all caps is kind of a no-no in internet etiquette, or netiquette, I think some people refer to it as. Okay, so let me set you straight about the simulator thing. I think you're confusing a couple different things. I really don't have an opinion personally about the use of things like Microsoft Flight Simulator or X-Plane or whatever. I don't do them myself, but I certainly don't think there's anything wrong with doing them. In fact, I think it's a really cool as I mentioned earlier in the show, I find it very, very fascinating. In fact, a lot of the people using these technologies probably know a lot more about the systems than I do on my own airplane. Lots of great stuff out there, and it's a great way to learn about aviation. And so, heck, I have no aversion against that kind of simulator utilization. What I'm referring to is when I have to go into the simulator every 6 months or 9 months or a year or whatever the airline you're flying for, whatever their requirement is, we go in, and it's not fun and games at all. It's not like, hey, I'm going to sit down, pop open a beer, grab some microwave popcorn or some Cheetos or something like that, and just, of course, I don't think you'd probably do that if you were doing the simulator because we get all over the keyboard. Yeah. But especially that orange stuff, I love Cheetos. Don't you? I'm so easily distracted. I'm hungry too. I'd love some Cheetos right now and a beer. So, yeah, we don't do that. We go into the box, we like to refer to it as, the full motion simulator, and we're being judged. We're being graded. We are being put under immense pressure to perform. And if we don't perform in a satisfactory manner, it can affect our career, and it could affect our income, if you get my drift. So it's not like going into the simulator is just a blast, a lot of fun, unless you just happen to be going into one of these full motion airline simulators because a friend of you happens to know somebody, and you go in there and you have fun and you fly under bridges and fly under the Eiffel Tower or the Golden Gate Bridge, and that's fun. But we don't do that. We go in because we have a certain allotted amount of time, and we have to fly all these different approaches, and we have to do these maneuvers, and then we get emergencies thrown at us, and we have to be graded on our cockpit resource management. And just trust me, it's not it's not a bed of roses. It's not a barrel of fun like the monkeys enjoy. It's something, and maybe you're kind of weird. I think that most average pilots like myself don't like going to the box, don't like going to the simulator. So I think that's probably what you're picking up on, and you're equating that with the world of PC simulators. Those are different, completely different thing. So, bottom line, just to reiterate, the PC simming world and the VATSIM and the Microsoft flight simulator programs and the X-Plane programs and all the different versions of computer simming, I think are fantastic. I think they're great. I think they're a great way to learn about aviation and the airlines and all that kind of stuff. The thing that I have to go to, full motion simulator, every year for my recurrent training, I hate it. I don't like it. Yuck. And so that's different. Okay. So hopefully I've clarified there. So I have no aversion. Well, I guess I do have an aversion to flights. And the other thing is that when I was in the Air Force, I was an Air Force instructor on the T-37. And part of, we didn't have, at that time, we didn't have separate people that did the instruction in the simulator, and then other people did the real airplane flight instruction. We all, when we were instructors back in the 80s, we all did it, all of it. So one period would be flying the airplane, the next period might be flying in the simulator. And I have hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of time in the T-37 flight simulator. And honestly, it almost makes me nauseated to even look at a simulator. I just don't want to spend any more time in there. So that is, I hope, an explanation for your wondering about my aversion to simulators. So, okay. Spent a lot more time on that than I expected to, so thanks for bearing with me, everybody. All right, let's see here. This is from Juan Carlos Gomez, and he's from Spain. He's learning English listening to podcasts. My English level is no high, so I think it means not high, but I can understand you fairly well. I am also very interested in aviation. I usually visit spotters' websites, and I have a nice collection of pictures. I like Boeing. Much better planes, authentic planes, than Airbuses. I enjoy very much traveling on planes. Congratulations for your amazing podcast. You are helping me with my two passions. English, American English especially. I don't like British dialect. And a good thing, because I can't do a British accent. It's horrible. I'm terrible with accents. And he says he likes the USA very much, your culture, your way of life. Thank you very much. Keep up your good work. Happy New Year for you and your family. I will buy you a cup of coffee. Not a lot of money because I'm not a wealthy man, but as much as I can. Thank you very much, Juan, for your sentiment regarding the coffee. And look, if you can't afford to give me some money for a cup of coffee in my coffee fund, I don't want you to. And then you make me feel guilty. And for those of you out there who are struggling with making very little money, and you need that money to buy your simulator programs or buy flight time in a real airplane, whatever, please don't send me any money. I really don't need it. Okay? Honestly. Thank you, though. I appreciate the thought. So, that is from Juan Carlos Gomez. And I'm going to talk about something a little bit later here in the show regarding English, especially aviation English, that you might be interested in. So stay tuned for that. Okay, greetings from South Africa. I stumbled across your YouTube channel looking at what life of a pilot is like. No, not for myself, but I'm having high hopes for employing my own pilots, and hopefully not the distant future, and would like to treat them right. And the first set of pics is a British Airways jet at Tambo in Johannesburg, South Africa. Apparently the ATC directed the plane on a not wide enough taxiway, and the wing clipped a brick building. Of course, I talked about that earlier. And yeah, it wasn't ATC's fault. I think that whoever was steering there, the captain, took a wrong turn, or didn't turn when he was supposed to. And then he says, the third pic is of a Harvard that was used by South Africa Air Force's trainers, and here's why you never dare an Air Force pilot. Oh, by the way, this is from Frick Gronewald. Gronewald. Groenewald. And I think I sent you an email, Frick, to kind of clarify. I got the two pictures of one, the British Airways 747 kind of slicing open like a can of sardines, the building over at Johannesburg, and a picture of the wing, the very heavily damaged wing and wingtip. I did not get the picture of the third picture of which you speak here at the last part of your email. So send it to me so I can look at it. So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to put off what you have said here about the Harvard and the flying of the South African Air Force jet and all that kind of stuff for a future podcast, if you don't mind. That way I can actually look at the picture. Okay? So thanks, Frick, for your feedback, and send me that picture. Okay. Somebody sent this to me. He said, I'm not even going to talk about that. Forget it. This was sent by John. He says, check out this article from USA Today. Okay, let me check it out. It's called The Future of Aviation Airline Leaders' Predictions. Wednesday marks the 100th anniversary of the first commercial flight. I talked about that in the last episode. A 23-minute hop across Florida's Tampa Bay. And let's see, pilot Tony Janis had room for just one passenger. He was the one that did that original flight, who sat next to him in the open cockpit. 3 months later, when tourism season ended, so did the subsidy. The airline had carried 1,204 passengers, would never fly again. With the anniversary in mind, the Associated Press reached out to today's aviation leaders to see what they are predicting for the future of flying. Okay, in 5 years, Richard Anderson, the CEO of Delta Airlines, quote, just over a decade ago, airlines seemed to be buying every 50-seat aircraft they could get their hands on. But the real utility of those small jets has come and gone, and in the next 5 years, we'll see their numbers in the U.S. continue to dwindle. The CEO of Southwest Airlines, Gary Kelly, says, we'll have fewer airlines, but they will be bigger, stronger, and healthier. And Maurice Gallagher, Jr., CEO of Allegiant Travel Company, the next 5 years will be all about increasing automation and decreasing labor cost. The industry is already implementing mobile boarding passes, bag drops, even self-boarding. These processes will become more prevalent and significantly reduce the number of employees the customer needs to interact with. Okay, let's go out farther. That was 5 years from now. In 25 years, David Barger, or Barger, I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, CEO of JetBlue, quote, the freedom to travel between any 2 points in the world will be commonplace. There will be billions of travelers every year flying on new aircraft that will be environmentally friendly. In fact, they will be making zero-carbon travel maybe even a reality. According to the CEO of Hawaiian Airlines, Mark Dunkerley, many of today's consumers will be priced out of the air, a sad legacy to 30 years of massive progress in democratizing air travel. Failure to invest in aviation infrastructure and the insatiable appetite for regulation will not be offset by relatively modest further improvements in aircraft efficiency. Wow, kind of a downer there, Mark. Let's see, the CEO of Etihad Airlines, James Hogan, a new generation of airlines who have the vision and willingness to be different will succeed in cutting costs, improving productivity, and finding affordable ways of assessing new markets. The emerging markets, the Middle East, Africa, Southeast Asia, will become established markets, and Abu Dhabi will be one of the uniting global hubs. Well, of course he thinks that, because that's his big hub. Let's see. Oh, what does Sir Richard Branson say, president of Virgin Atlantic? I have no doubt that during my lifetime We will be able to fly from London to Sydney in under 2 hours with minimal environmental impact. The awe-inspiring views of our beautiful planet below and zero-gravity passenger fun will bring a whole new meaning to in-flight entertainment. Well, that's very optimistic, I think. And Jeff Smizik, the CEO of United Airlines. The airframe and engine manufacturers continue to develop aircraft that are more fuel efficient, have lower maintenance costs, and have greater range and utility. Longer term, I believe manufacturers will explore engine and airframe technology that could significantly reduce travel times, but advances in this area would have to be safe and economical to make a real impact on the industry. Let's see. Oh, how about this one? Here's the last portion of this article from the USA Today. In 100 years, David Siegel, the CEO of Frontier Airlines. The first flight was just 18 miles long, but now look how far we can go. Perhaps, and he's talking about commercial flight, perhaps in the future, experts will be designing futuristic propulsion systems. We could see innovations in aircraft design, local community-based air transport with smaller, high-efficiency aircraft, maybe even pilotless commercial aircraft. And then Doug Parker, the CEO of American Airlines, newly formed. I am quite certain that Tony Jannus never could have imagined the size and importance of commercial aviation today or the impact it had on changing our world. Similarly, I cannot imagine what commercial aviation will look like in 2114. I imagine whatever state it is, though, it will be extremely important, and its continued development will be a part of the story that built the world. And Ben Baldanza, the CEO of Spirit Airlines, says, Google's Put Me There technology implemented into its Maps software renders all airlines obsolete. So the CEO of Spirit Airlines says in 100 years, there ain't going to be no airlines. You're just going to use Google to put you there, I guess, like transporting like in Star Trek or something. Okay, let's move on. I told you it's going to be a long show, didn't I? How are we doing here? I haven't even gotten halfway through this. Well, I'm getting close. Okay, where am I? Oh, shoot. I'm scrolling down the list. Oh, we have some more audio feedback. Yay, I get to take a break here. This is from Andreas in Sweden. Here we go.
Hi there, Captain Jeff. This is Andreas from Sweden speaking. Some input regarding the sleep apnea test. I believe that it is a good thing, and if you are one of the chosen ones, perhaps you should see this as an opportunity to get tested for free. For the listeners that doesn't know about sleep apnea is when a person stops breathing for short periods during sleep. Occasional brief pauses in breathing during sleep is not dangerous. But if you get repeated pauses in breathing during sleep, you may experience a lack of oxygen in the body. It is usually caused by the tongue falling backwards in the throat, especially when lying on your back while sleeping. Then, the airflow to and from the lungs can be partially and/or completely blocked, and this is known as obstructive sleep apnea. It is common to snore before or after these breathing pauses. This hypoxia that the brain is experiencing makes it reacting by waking up a few seconds before falling asleep again, and this is something that you would not normally notice. In fact, the word apnea means sleep without breathing, and it is really important to get help if you have sleep apnea but do not do anything about it. Further symptoms such as sadness, irritability, or memory disorder can occur. Sleep apnea is something that can cause high blood pressure as well as stroke. It is also known that the increase in fatigue from sleep apnea also increases the risk for traffic accidents. And if you have some other disease, it is especially important to get treatment for this, because poor sleep makes the body weaker and can cause worsen the condition of your disease. Now, there is simple treatment for this, so it's unlikely that someone would get grounded and or lose their job over this. Most people get better by a so-called CPAP device, which is a nasal mask that blows a light stream of air into your nose when you sleep, and that dilates the airways. For others, it helps to use a simple brace at night. My brother, for instance, had sleep apnea, and he got the brace thing, and his comment was, "So, this is what sleep really should be like?" Once again, thanks for a great show. Bye.
Well, thank you, Andreas, for your feedback. And you know what? I agree with you. Yeah, it is a serious thing. And I think that if people are indeed suffering from it, that they should be treated for it. And my reporting of it was mainly the angle that this is something that was put into effect, into law, a rule that didn't use the proper channels and wasn't widely disseminated, or it was basically widely disseminated as this is the new rule before anybody knew it was coming. And the other point, I think for some people, and correct me if I'm wrong if you're listening out there, the rule that was proposed by the federal air surgeon was that if you had the body mass index 40 or above, or a neck size of 17 inches or larger, that you would have to go and get one of these sleep studies, and it was not going to be paid for by the government, and it was not going to be probably not likely paid for by your insurance company, which around this in our country is pretty soon going to be the same thing, right? I hope not. And from what I know or what I've read, I don't know if this is true or not, but these sleep studies can be like $5,000, and so that's something that needs to be addressed. That not everybody. I mean, just because you go out there and you're a private pilot doesn't mean you're filthy rich and you can take $5,000 out of your checking account to pay for a sleep study. So that's something that we have to look at, and hopefully our insurance companies will help pay for that. So that was a concern by a lot of people. And of course the concern that if you have that problem, that you will be grounded for a certain period of time, and the concern about your paycheck. So, but I do agree. Don't get me wrong. I wasn't like anti sleep apnea policy. I'm just kind of wondering if maybe we can implement it in a better way. And I do believe that if you're suffering from a lack of sleep because of snoring or that lack of breathing, that you should address that, and it definitely affects your health. So I appreciate that feedback, Andreas. I really do. And I hope that our listeners learn something from it. Okay. This is from Dave in Toronto. I hear the following commands on my local live ATC. Could you please explain briefly the difference between them? Number 1, cleared for the localizer. Okay. You'll remember in our discussion of the instrument landing system, the ILS system, that it's essentially for a full ILS system, it has at least 2 components: the vertical guidance, the slope, and the lateral guidance, the localizer, which keeps the airplane going into the runway, usually exactly aligned with the heading of the runway, all the way down. And then the vertical, the glide slope, gives you that vertical guidance all the way down. So initially, when you're being vectored for an ILS approach or a localizer only approach without glide slope operative, you're given a heading, and then at a certain point the control will say, fly this heading, maintain this altitude, and intercept the localizer. Or, fly this heading, maintain 5,000 until this point, cleared for the ILS approach. So basically, there are times when the controller wants you to track inbound and capture the localizer, fly the localizer to the runway, but they're not quite ready to let you commence the vertical portion of the approach. So that's why they say cleared to intercept the localizer. And then at some point, if it's a full ILS approach, they'll tell you that you're cleared for the ILS approach, and that means you're cleared not only to track the localizer into the runway, but also to intercept the glide slope and fly the glide slope down to the runway. Okay, so there's the difference between those two. And then the third thing you said is cleared for the approach to runway 24. And that is more of a generic term. If you're flying and you're being vectored for an ILS approach, and they just say cleared for the approach to runway 24 right, then I'm assuming that you're cleared for the ILS approach runway 24 right. It could be an RNAV approach. It could be a VOR approach, an NDB approach. Could be one of many different types of approaches. So that's just a generic term. And sometimes even you'll hear the term cleared for an approach, and the controller may not specify a runway or what approach that you are to fly. Now, the places where you'll encounter that is when you're in a non-radar contact and the airport you're flying into is a non-towered airport. So many, many years ago when I was a co-pilot in the 727, I used to fly with my airline into Bozeman, Montana, and at that time, I think they do have an operating tower now, but at that time they did not have an operational control tower. It was an uncontrolled field, and that just blew me away. I said, wait a minute, how can we be flying into this airport with passengers on board a major airline and not have, an operating control tower? That just seemed nuts to me. Augusta, Georgia was another one that we flew to routinely without an operating control, and we do now. A lot of places the tower closes at 11 o'clock at night or something. They have limited hours of operation, and then outside of that time, you have to use non-tower procedures, and basically it's an uncontrolled field. So if you're flying, we were flying from Salt Lake City into Bozeman, and then at a certain point in our descent, the controller said, radar contact or radar service is terminated. You are cleared for an approach to Bozeman Airport. And again, I think I was a maybe I was a flight engineer at the time, and I just kind of looked around at the two pilots. What does that mean? So I learned very quickly that it's up to you. Based on the winds at the airport, you can decide, and the weather conditions, you can decide what kind of an approach you're going to. Now, of course, you're going to have to communicate that on the radio frequency so that everybody else that flying into that airport knows what you're doing. But okay, so I hope that cleared up some of those questions. Dave from Toronto. David Shore says, I would assume that generally speaking, it's most economical for you to fly at the highest altitude possible. Quite often before taking off on a long-range flight, the pilot will announce that he will fly for a while at, say, 35,000 feet to burn off some fuel before climbing to the cruising altitude of 39,000 feet. Why would he not climb directly right up to 39,000 feet? I guess there must be a calculation that proves this to be more economical. Your comments, please. Oh, this is Dave from Toronto. Another question. Okay. So, Dave, what that means is when flights are planned and we have a heavy load of passengers, or maybe we're carrying a lot of fuel because it's a long flight, or we have a distant alternate requirement, or we have holding requirements, whatever, and we initially we are so heavy, the weight of the airplane is so heavy that we cannot make that higher altitude at that point. So we have to level off at a lower altitude based on performance calculations and stay there for a while. And as we're there at that altitude, over time, of course, the engines are burning fuel and the airplane is becoming lighter and lighter and lighter. And nowadays, all we have to do, in the old days, before flight management systems and computers, we pulled out our documents and operation data manuals and different things, looked at the charts, went in at a certain weight and a certain temperature and followed that curve, and with our pencil and graph and everything else, and find out what our maximum allowable altitude is based on those conditions. Well, nowadays it's much easier because we have these flight management computers where we just put in update the fuel load so it has we know what our operational empty weight of the airplane is. We know how many passengers are on board, so we know what the zero fuel weight is, basically the weight of the airplane without the fuel. And then to that figure we add the weight of the fuel, because we have these gauges that are telling us how much fuel we have on board in pounds or kilograms, or depending on what system you're working with. And you add those two together, and then you know what your actual gross weight is, your actual weight at that point. And the system knows, based on many, many different parameters that it's getting that are getting inputted into the system, that and based on the winds and everything else, that this is your optimum altitude. And there are indications sometimes that once you get to this weight, if you do a step climb to this next altitude, this is how much money you're going to save, or this is how much fuel burn you're going to save, and be more economical or more fuel efficient. And so in this case, where they level off initially at 35,000 feet, they're going to burn off some fuel, and that's what they mean, literally. They're going to be burning off fuel, and at some point they'll be light enough so that the airplane can perform at that higher altitude. Now there are occasions when, even though the airplane is capable of flying at a much higher altitude, we don't go up to that higher altitude. And that could be for turbulence factors. In other words, I've flown, especially this time of year, certain altitudes have just terrible rides. They're just way too bumpy. And so we stay at a lower altitude for a while until we're beyond that area. And then once the ride reports are good at the higher altitudes, then we request a climb, and we climb up to the higher altitudes. Also this time of year, especially if you're traveling from, as I've been doing a lot recently, from the northeastern United States to the south, there are huge headwinds, and sometimes the headwind is so strong at the higher altitudes that you stay at a lower altitude to get less headwind. And it turns out, even though you're burning more fuel at the lower altitude, if you factor in the fact that the headwind is much lighter at the lower altitude, that actually may be more fuel efficient than going up to the high altitude with that really, really big headwind. So many different factors involved in it, but that's the reason, because everything is based on, several things. The weight of the airplane, what it can actually do, how it can perform, and the winds, the turbulence, so many different things. So I hope that answered your question, Dave. And until we get another one, we're going to move on to New York City Matt. I'm assuming NYC Matt means New York City Matt. Straight to the questions. You have mentioned the Air National Guard as a part-time alternative to joining the U.S. Air Force. Do you know anything more about the Air National Guard, how it differs from the United States Air Force, whether or not the Air Guard pilots get much flying time, or do you know someone that could give more info about it? I'm considering taking the military route to the airlines after I finish college. Do you know what it takes for an airline pilot with FAA certifications to fly as an airline pilot in Europe? And how does the ATC decide upon which squawk codes to assign to traffic? Okay, so you have a few questions here. As far as the Air National Guard is concerned, Air National Guard pilots basically get the same exact training that U.S. Air Force pilots do, except that when you are finished with your training, you go to your unit, and depending on the unit, what kind of airplanes are flying, what the economy is like at the time, how much funding the military is getting from Congress and taxpayers, depends on how much flying they're going to do. So it's really hard to be specific about that. During the Gulf War and the recent wars that we've been involved in Iraq and Afghanistan, there was a lot of flying, a heck of a lot of flying. In fact, many people had airline jobs and were also Air National Guard, Air Reserve, Air Force Reserve pilots, etc., that basically got activated, and they had to take a big, long leave from their regular jobs as airline pilots to do the flying that was necessary for the Air Guard and the reserves. So, it could be a heck of a lot of flying. If you're a full-time reservist or a full-time Guard member, you can rack up a bunch of time. Again, it depends on the unit. It depends on what kind of airplanes they're flying, etc., what the economy is like at the time. Or, if you're doing it literally on a part-time basis, you may not get as much flying time. So it's just, it's really too hard to say for sure with certainty exactly how much time you'd be getting, etc. The hardest thing about getting a guard job or a reserve job, especially with a pilot slot, is knowing the right people to hire you. That unit has to interview you and hire you and, put you in one of their slots that they're allotted every year because it costs the unit money. And so, you got to know people or know people that know people to get one of those coveted pilot slots at a guard unit or a reserve unit. So especially, if you're just starting out and you want to get a pilot training slot. So, hey, listeners out there, if you've done that route or if you're in the Air National Guard, if you're in the reserve, if I said anything that was wrong or you want to amplify what I've just said, please send me some feedback so I can help out NYC Matt. Okay, the second thing he asked, what it takes for an airline pilot with FAA certifications to fly as an airline pilot in Europe. I think you have to take their version of the airline transport pilot licenses, and I think it's a little bit more involved. There are more tests you have to take and practical exams, etc. But there are, if you just do a Google search for those ratings, you'll see that there are companies out there set up for you to learn about, to study for, to take the examinations. If the I don't know if an airline over in Europe would require that you have that kind of rating. I would think they would, but I don't know for sure. I don't know if they'd take somebody like me who already has an airline transport pilot certificate license and not require me to do anything else. I doubt it, but I'm not sure. I don't know the answer to that one. Again, help people. And I can answer this one, though. How does ATC, well, I think so. How does ATC decide upon which squawk codes to assign to traffic? Now, I know I have some air traffic controllers that listen to the show occasionally. So again, correct me if I'm wrong about this, but my belief and my feeling is that these squawk codes are assigned randomly by a computer system. That's pretty much how they do it, I think. I think when a flight plan is filed, it just goes into this big airspace system computer, and it just spits out a certain 4-digit code. Is that right? Kevin Cox? Sean McCarney? Do I have that right? Just a guess, but I think that's probably the way it's done. All right. Thank you, New York City Matt, for your questions, and I hope that helped, and I hope that somebody out there will help me answer those questions better for you. Dun, dun, dun. Let's see. Kevin St. John wished me a safe and happy New Year. He sent a deposit to my coffee fund. Thank you very much, sir. I do appreciate that. He's been a big supporter of me and the Airline Pilot Guy Show for some time. And he said that he wanted to sign up for Patreon, but he didn't see the Airline Pilot Guide listed. And again, I kind of mentioned that earlier, that I thought that it was already set up, but I'm going to be meeting, I was supposed to meet with Cole earlier today. I thought I was going to be home, but I picked up this trip, so I'm not, and I had to reschedule my appointment with one of the people that run this new service, Patreon. So I'll try to do whatever it is I need to do to get this thing live so you can find me there. So I'll let you know. I think I have to make a video to explain to everybody that goes to the site, what this whole thing is and how you do it and that kind of thing. So thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. Ruth Ann. Wow, hour 40. I'm probably almost 3 hours now. I'm going to have to cut this off really soon. But let me do this first because I want to do this. Ruth Ann, or Ruth, sent me some feedback. She made a nice contribution to my coffee fund. Thank you, Ruth Ann. Some time ago in podcast number 83, you made a mention of AvTalk app for iPad, mentioned to you by John Clem, which brought some traffic to our website, advancedairlinecommunication.com. Not too sure how many translated into purchases of the app, but the exposure was good, so thanks very much. You're welcome. Brief history. A few recently retired airline pilots and myself, having met up in our flight ops training department at the time, got to discussing the state of aviation English experienced and overheard in the flight deck. One thing led to another, and we decided on what parts of the 12 phases of flight seemed to cause the most confusion among non-native English-speaking pilots. In addition, we also added lots of 9s, 7s, and letter combinations that were unscientifically determined to cause pronunciation problems. Once the routes were determined, we recorded the ATC and flight deck communication. All this was then vetted by the pilots, and after the content was approved, I created the app for sale on iTunes. It is not intended to teach basic aviation English, thus the advanced in our advanced airline communication name, but to help straighten out some bad mispronunciation and to build confidence in delivering routine flight deck communication as experienced in an airline flight operations environment. It should also be of benefit to those airline pilots who are trying to maintain or exceed ICAO Level 4 English. Having said all that, if you got some time, I would appreciate your review of our app. And she sent me a promo code for it. And so I downloaded the app. It's for iPad only, iOS. And it's $19.99, so basically $20. And you can find it on the iTunes Store. And again, it's called AvTalk app for iPad. And she says, by the way, I've been told that there is an occasional voice in there that sounds like Minnie Mouse. But hey, who hasn't heard squeaky ATC communication from time to time? So, again, this is from Ruth Ann Imrie, I guess you pronounce your last name, I-M-R-I-E, from the AvTalk app, Operational Aviation English. So I downloaded it, and I played with it a little bit, just a little bit, not too in-depth. Very cool concept, very great idea. For those of you listening, and many of you have mentioned that one of the reasons why you listen to the show is to learn a little bit of English, especially aviation English. Here's some aviation terms that I use, and that helps you with that. You know, as an aside, I can't imagine. I mean, learning how to fly is difficult, and learning how to fly speaking the international language of aviation, which is English, is I mean, it's difficult for those of us who speak English, but I cannot imagine. Let's say that the international aviation or language of aviation was French or Japanese or Chinese or something like that. I cannot imagine having to learn at least a little bit of that language and learn how to fly at the same time. That just boggles my mind. So my hat is off, literally. My hat's not on. My hat is off to all of you international pilots out there who not only, are learning how to fly, which is, somewhat difficult in itself, but also you're learning how to speak English. It's just, I'm astonished. So if you're one of those people out there who are wanting to improve their ICAO, what does she say? ICAO Level 4 English, check out this app. It's $19.99 on the iTunes Store, and it's well worth it. I think that you'll really you'll gain a lot of knowledge, and you'll be able to practice, etc. I think this will be beneficial to you. So it has the Captain Jeff stamp of approval. I just made that up. But now it's forever from this point on, the Captain Jeff stamp of approval. For whatever that's worth. Okay, so thanks, Ruth, for your contribution to my fund. I do appreciate that as well. I'll have a link to that in the show notes. Okay. I'm going to skip this for right now. And I'm going to just hit a couple more, and then I'm going to call it a show. Okay? And I'll do the rest of these later. Just recently, I got this from Vince. And he said, by the way, I voted for the Airline Pilot Guy in the recent 2013 Podcast Awards. Thank you. It didn't do any good, though, Vince. Good day, Captain Jeff. I'm a private pilot out of Toronto and a big fan of your podcast. I very much enjoy the spontaneity of your broadcasts. For instance, the running shower, the squawking bird, and the occasional hotel property maintenance team producing background noise. He laughs every time. Good. I'm glad that everybody's enjoying this. Okay, my question for you is in regards to something I noticed on the center post in the cockpit of the 727. He has a picture here of the 727 cockpit, which brings back a lot of memories. He says, looks like there are two small red balls sitting on a flat piece of metal at approximately eye level. Were these used for some kind of guidance before the days of the modern heads-up display? So he has this picture here in the center post of the this Boeing cockpit, which, by the way, is essentially the same cockpit as the 737, the 707, and 727. They use the same windscreen configuration with that center post. And on that center post, as Vince mentioned, is like a flat piece of metal about halfway up. And on top of that flat piece of metal are two red balls, one on the left side and one on the right side. And so he's wondering, is that some kind of an ancient heads-up system, guidance system? No. And you're going to laugh when you hear what this thing is for. It's for properly positioning your seat. Okay, so when the designers of these cockpits, designed all the instrumentation, and they teach us all these references for, how to tell where your wingtip is on your right side and your wingtip is on the left side, etc. They are doing this all from a certain position that they're assuming that your head is in. And so this is just a very, very basic mechanical device so that when you look at it and it's lined up a certain way, I don't remember exactly how the thing works, but there's like maybe a slot and then the red ball, and then if you're in the proper position as far as vertically with the height of the seat and backwards and forwards going up closer to the windscreen or back further away, if you look over at that red little ball and whatever the alignment device is, that you're in the proper position. Okay. Now some people will go, oh, that's interesting, but I don't like that position. I've flown with pilots that have the seat almost all the way to the floor, and I don't know how they can even see over the glare shield to see outside of the airplane. And then I've flown with guys who have had their seat up so high that their head is bumping against the cockpit ceiling. And I've tried all kinds of different positions in my career, and sometimes I'll just try something new just to see if it's going to help me get a better landing. And I found recently that I tend to sit a little bit higher than most people, but then I'll lower it a couple notches before I land, and that gives me a little bit better perspective as I look out the window for my landing, because as we should all do when you are landing at a certain point, as you're focusing on the touchdown zone and your airspeed, touchdown zone, airspeed, and you are in that flare mode, at some point it's a good idea to shift your gaze to the far end of the runway, and that kind of helps you judge. You're using all these peripheral clues to judge your rate of descent and your flare and make that perfect landing. If you, however, continue to fixate on that aim point from your initial glide path all the way down, usually you'll prang it on. So I just find that sitting a little bit lower and using the glare shield as an aid to kind of look at the horizon line, where the end of the runway is, helps me. So I don't know. What's your favorite technique out there? Do you have any? Do you have the key to the perfect landing? If you do, you know what to do. Feedback, airlinepilotguy.com. But that's what that is, that little flat piece of metal in the 727. Vince, thanks for your vote in the podcast awards, and thanks for listening to my show. I'm glad that I entertain you. I'm glad somebody's getting something out of it. And one more thing I wanted to talk about. It had to do with something that I talked about in an earlier show, and just bear with me here. I'm going to find it. Oh, here it is. It's one more piece of audio feedback before we end the show, okay? Here we go.
Hi, Captain Jeff. This is Mechanic Bob.
Oh, Mechanic Bob
recording
again.
this to leave you some feedback on the question a listener had about what you have to do if a jet engine runs out of fuel, if you have to do any kind of bleeding to get the air out of the system. The normal procedure for that would be to do what we call a wet motor, which is after we have the airplane in maintenance and we've done work in the fuel tank and have had the airplane defueled, you basically spin the engine with the starter just like you would if you were going to do a normal engine start. The only difference is you would disable the ignition system, so the engine would get fuel just like it normally would during a regular engine start, but there's nothing to light it off. And then after you do a wet motor, you want to do a dry motor to clear all that atomized fuel out of your engine so you don't get a nice big boom the next time you try to start it. So you spin the engine a second time with no fuel going into it, and that just moves a bunch of air through it and clears everything out, and then you're ready to do a normal engine start. That's not to say that if you tried to do an engine start without doing that procedure after you've had the whole airplane defueled that it wouldn't start, but you could end up having some problems. You could have a big fireball out of the tailpipe, or I've seen some engines that like to start really hot if you try to start them after you've had the fuel lines taken apart, or and it would be harder on the starter because it takes that much longer to get fuel out to the engine, so you're making the starter work a lot harder. So I hope that helps in answering your listener's question, and thanks for keeping up a good show, and I'll look forward to hearing your next episode.
Thank you, Mechanic Bob, again for your help. That was twice in one show. We should call this the Mechanic Bob Show. Well, not quite yet. You're not there yet, Mechanic Bob. But I do really appreciate your feedback. It's always good to get some expert answers to some of these questions to which I don't really know the answer. So thanks for helping me out. I appreciate that. I do know that anytime we have a problem with starting an engine, our procedure is to continue to motor the engine or to, disengage the starter, letting everything spool down, and then running the engine, spooling it for a certain amount of time to kind of help out, blow out any fuel that may have puddled up in the combustion area of the engine before putting the ignition to it, because as you said, you don't want a big boom, and occasionally you'll get that anyway, which is kind of startling, not only to the passengers but also to the pilots. So again, thanks for your feedback, sir. I do appreciate that. And with that, I think I'm going to end this show, and just a reminder, the next episode is going to be my 100th. And am I going to do anything special? Nope, because it would require way too much planning and organizing and work on my part. And hey, if you've listened to me at any length in the last few episodes or the last few years, you know that that's not one of my best traits. So it'll just be basically another show. It'll just happen to be the 100th episode of the Airline Pilot Guy. Yeah, it's a milestone. And I'm glad that I'm still doing it. I'm glad that I'm still able to inform, entertain, enlighten some of you out there. I hope and am glad that I am a role model for some of you. I just love my job. I really do. And I love informing people about what's going on the other side of that cockpit door. And that's why I do the show. So let's see. Probably the best thing for me to do, because I've experienced this in the past and I've screwed it up. So let's go to the closing script. Remember, you too can send feedback at airlinepilotguy.com. You can go to the Google Voice feedback line 304-99-PILOT, 304-997-4568. You can send voicemail to me by going over to, or using SpeakPipe. Go to the website airlinepilotguy.com and click on the, what is it, send me feedback? Oh shoot, I've forgotten now what I put there. Oh, see what I mean about not being organized here? What is the tab that I have here? Okay, well, I'm pulling up my website right now. You'll probably hear the clicky noises in the background. Here we go. Oh, contact me. There you go. Go to my website, go to contact me, and then you'll see the little tab on the right side, the little blue tab over there that says send a voicemail. And that uses the SpeakPipe system, uses your computer and its microphone to send me a message. So that's another way you can send me feedback. So there's just all kinds of ways. You can follow me on Facebook, Airline Pilot Guy, and also I'm on Twitter, Airline Pilot Guy, and on Stitcher. And you can hear me there, Airline Pilot Guy on Stitcher. If you want to download the Stitcher app, just go to stitcher.com/airlinepilot. Okay, well, finally, until next time, our 100th episode, next week, hopefully, God willing, wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care, and God bless.